What's up everyone? You're here at Arcane Paradox. We're dropping something epic today. What if Dobby's elf magic detected 33 loyalty reroutes on Harry age 6 and Elf Council invaded Britain? Like and subscribe if you enjoy. Let's get started. Chapter 1, The Weight of 33 Chains. The summer Dudley Desley turned 6, Vernon bought him a bicycle, a remote-controlled helicopter, a paddling pool, and a complete set of building blocks that came in a wooden crate the size of a small wardrobe. There was a party with 12 children from school, a clown who made balloon animals, and a cake shaped like a racing car with real edible silver wheels. The summer Harry Potter turned 6, nobody remembered. Not at first, anyway. Petunia noticed at breakfast, noticed in the way you notice a crack in the ceiling, meaning you file it away somewhere behind more important thoughts and keep moving. She set a bowl of porridge in front of Harry without meeting his eyes, and Harry ate it looking at the table, and that was the sum total of acknowledgement that another year had passed in the life of the boy living in the cupboard under the stairs. Harry didn't mind, exactly. Minding things required a kind of energy he was still learning to locate. He knew his birthday was the 31st of July because he'd found it written in the back of an old school almanac that Dudley had thrown at him the previous autumn. He'd kept the page, folded very small, tucked into the crack between the skirting board and the wall in his cupboard. He wasn't sure why. It just seemed important to know. Outside, the July heat sat on Privet Drive like something with weight. The neighbors' roses were going soft at the edges. Dudley and his friend Piers Polkiss were in the garden with a water pistol the size of a small bazooka, and every so often a shriek of laughter punched through the kitchen window and Petunia looked up from her magazine with a fond, distant smile. Harry finished his porridge and brought the bowl to the sink and washed it, because if he didn't wash it Aunt Petunia would find it there at lunchtime and the look on her face would be its own kind of punishment. He dried his hands on the dish towel. Then he went back to his cupboard, pulled the door mostly shut, and sat in the dark that smelled of dust and old shoes, and didn't think about bicycles. He was almost asleep when something small, warm, and trembling pressed itself against the door from outside. Harry frowned. He pushed the door open an inch. There was a creature in the hallway. It was roughly the size of a 5-year-old child, but built entirely differently, enormous green eyes like lamps, bat-like ears lying flat against an elongated skull, skin the color of old putty. It was wearing what appeared to be a pillowcase with holes cut in it. Its fingers, wrapped around the doorframe, were shaking. It was looking at him with an expression Harry had never seen on anything in his life. Adults sometimes looked at him with exasperation or contempt or that specific blankness that meant they decided not to see him. Dudley looked at him like a problem to be solved, usually physically. But this creature was looking at him like Harry was something precious that had been found broken in a dustbin, and the combination of fury and grief in those enormous eyes was almost too much to look at directly. "You is Harry Potter," the creature whispered. "Yeah," Harry said. The creature made a sound that was not quite a word. It pressed one hand flat against the doorframe and the other against its own chest, and for a moment it simply breathed, very carefully, the way people breathe when they are trying very hard not to cry. "Dobby is a house elf," it said at last. "Dobby has been watching. Dobby has been," it stopped. Swallowed. "Dobby has been very worried." Harry considered this. Nobody had ever been very worried about him before, not in a way that meant anything. "Okay," he said carefully. "How come?" Dobby looked at him for a long moment. Then he held up one trembling hand, and his fingers were glowing, not like a torch, not sharp and cold, but warm, amber, the color of firelight through curtains. "Dobby must ask Harry Potter a question," he said. "An important question. Does Harry Potter give Dobby permission to perform a wellness scan?" "A what?" "It is old magic. Elf magic. It will not hurt Harry Potter. Dobby only wishes to," he paused, seemed to choose his next words with great care, "to see what is there." Harry looked at the glowing hand. He looked at the enormous terrified eyes. Something in his chest, some cautious animal thing that had learned to be very still in this house, said this one is safe. He wasn't sure how he knew that. He knew it anyway. "All right," he said. Dobby reached out and pressed 2 fingertips, very gently, against Harry's forehead. The warmth spread inward like sunlight through glass. It wasn't unpleasant. It felt, Harry thought, a bit like the first moment of sleep, that soft dissolving feeling, like something uncleansing. He watched Dobby's face while it happened and saw the expression there shift from gentle concentration to something else, something that moved through several stages too quickly to name, landing finally on a kind of frozen horror. Dobby pulled his hand back. He stood very still. Then he made a sound that Harry would remember for the rest of his life, a high, tearing, wordless sound, not a scream exactly, more like the noise a person makes when they see something terrible happening and cannot stop it, even after it has already happened, even after it is done. "Dobby," Harry said, alarmed. But Dobby wasn't listening. His eyes had gone somewhere else, somewhere far away and inward, and his lips were moving without sound, and his hands were pressed against either side of his head as if he was trying to keep something in or something out. The amber glow had spread from his fingers to his whole body, and it was no longer warm, it was fierce, bright, furious. 33, Dobby whispered. 33 loyalty reroutes on a child. On a 6-year-old baby, Dobby, what? Harry Potter must not speak, Dobby said, and his voice had changed entirely. It was not the trembling whisper from before. It was something old and very serious. Harry Potter must please be very quiet for one moment. Dobby must call someone. He pressed both hands to the ground. The hallway of number 4, Privet Drive went completely silent. Then the carpet began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter, a deep pulsing gold that moved outward from Dobby's hands in rings, like water when a stone drops. The pictures on the wall rattled. The coat-rack fell over. Upstairs, something heavy shifted, and Petunia Desley appeared at the top of the stairs in her dressing gown with a face like a thundercloud. "What on earth is?" she started. Dobby looked up at her. Just looked. And Petunia Desley, who was afraid of very little except her neighbor's opinions and the possibility of abnormality, took 2 steps back and said nothing at all. The gold light pulsed once more, a deep resonant beat like a very large slow heart, and then it went out. The hallway was ordinary again. Dobby straightened up. "They are coming," he said softly. "Harry Potter must get his shoes." They came just after midnight. Harry sat on the front step in his 2 large trainers, Dudley's cast-offs, like everything else he owned, and watched the street. Dobby sat beside him, very upright, hands folded in his lap. Inside, the Desleys had retreated to the sitting room. Petunia had tried twice to send Harry to his cupboard and both times Dobby had simply looked at her with those enormous eyes and she'd stopped, which was remarkable, because Petunia never stopped. The night was warm and the street was empty and then, without any transition that Harry could identify, no crack of apparition, no shimmer of port key, they were simply there. 7 of them. Elves, like Dobby but not like Dobby, because where Dobby was small and trembling and urgent, these were composed in a way that had nothing to do with stillness. They stood in a loose formation on the front path, and every one of them radiated something Harry felt in his back teeth, a low thrumming pressure that wasn't quite sound. The one in the center was taller than the others by half a head. She was ancient. Harry didn't have a word for how ancient, he just felt it, the way you feel the age of very old buildings, and she wore a robe the color of deep water, fastened at the throat with something that caught the light without reflecting it. Her eyes were silver. Not gray. Silver, like new coins, and they found Harry's face and held it with a precision that made him feel, briefly, like a very small and very precisely observed thing. "Dobby," she said. Her voice was low, measured, each word placed with the care of someone who does not speak lightly. "Show me." Dobby pressed his hand to Harry's forehead again. The amber light returned, and this time it expanded outward, and the tall elf, and the 6 behind her, all leaned in fractionally, and a silence fell over Privet Drive so complete that Harry could hear his own heartbeat. The silver-eyed elf's expression did not change. That was somehow worse than if it had. I see 33, she said, after a long moment. Yes, Elder Mira, Dobby said. Name the heaviest. The heaviest reroute is Albus Dumbledore's compulsion for docility and self-sacrifice, placed at 15 months old. The second heaviest is a dark anchor from Voldemort's failed killing curse, embedded in the scar. Third is a ministry-placed perception filter, placed when Harry Potter was 2, designed to suppress accidental magic displays below a detectable threshold. Stop. Elder Mira held up one hand. She looked at Harry. Do you know what we are talking about, child? No, Harry said honestly. Someone has tied ropes to your magic, she said. Many someones. Since you were a baby. These ropes tell your magic what it is allowed to do and who it is allowed to serve and how small it is allowed to make you. She paused. You did not know. No, Harry said again. Something moved across Elder Myra's face. It was quick, and it was not gentle, and it had nothing to do with the situation she was looking at and everything to do with the people who had created it. Dobby, she said. You were right to call. Dobby made a small sound. He pressed his knuckles to his mouth and nodded, and his eyes were bright with something Harry belatedly recognized as relief, the specific relief of someone who has been screaming into a void and finally heard an echo. Elder Mira crouched down in front of Harry. Up close, her face was extraordinary, not beautiful exactly, more like something that had been carved by weather rather than design. There were lines around her eyes and mouth that looked like they'd been put there by centuries of seeing things clearly. Harry Potter, she said. I am Elder Mira of the Sovereign Elf Council. I have authority over all elfcraft within Britain and over all magical contracts and compulsions that affect beings under elf protection. She held his gaze. I am asking your permission to remove what has been placed in you without your consent. Harry stared at her. Can you do that? Yes. Will it hurt? Some of them will sting. The dark anchor will hurt considerably. She said it without softening it, and Harry appreciated that. You may stop at any time. Harry thought about this for exactly 3 seconds. Then he said, do it. The sitting room had been commandeered. Petunia stood in the kitchen doorway with Vernon's hand on her shoulder, Vernon who had come downstairs 20 minutes ago to find 7 supernatural creatures in his hallway and had subsequently gone the color of old putty, and watched, with the expression of someone experiencing something their brain is actively refusing to process, as Harry sat in the armchair that was usually Vernon's armchair and glowed. The 6 council elves had arranged themselves in a circle. Elder Mira stood at Harry's head, her hands hovering just above his temples, and the light that came from her hands was the deep silver of her eyes, and it moved through Harry in slow deliberate waves. Dobby stood at the door, watching everything, his whole body rigid with attention. The first reroutes came loose easily. Harry felt them as small tugs, like splinters being pulled, a brief bright sting and then a strange hollow feeling, like a room you didn't know was furnished has been emptied. He sat very still through it. He was good at being still, he'd had a lot of practice. The ministry compulsion came out around the 4th. Harry felt that one differently, it came with a sensation like a mask being lifted off a face he hadn't known was covered, and for a moment everything in the room went slightly too bright, slightly too clear, and he gripped the arms of the chair and breathed. There, Elder Mira said quietly. That one was suppressing your perception of magic. Look at your hands. Harry looked down. His hands were glowing. Not the amber of Dobby's light or the silver of Elder Myra's, his was something else, something green-gold and urgent, pulsing with every heartbeat. That, Elder Mira said, is what your magic actually looks like. From the kitchen doorway, Petunia made a very small sound. Harry looked at his hands for a long moment. Then he looked up and found Dobby watching him from the doorway, and Dobby was smiling, proper smiling, not the small anxious twitch from earlier, and Harry felt something unlock in his chest that had been locked so long he'd forgotten it was there. Keep going, he said. They kept going. Some came out like splinters. Some came out like fish hooks, sudden and searing. One, laid in so deeply that Elder Mira had to call one of the other council elves to help, came out with a sound like tearing paper, and Harry made a noise that was not crying but was in the same neighborhood, and Dobby was across the room in an instant, one small warm hand gripping Harry's wrist, and Harry held on. Then they reached the scar. "This one," Elder Mira said, and her voice was careful in a new way, "is not a compulsion." "What is it?" Harry asked, though some part of him already felt it, now that the other 32 reroutes had been pulled out and he could feel the actual shape of what was in him. There was something in his scar that was not him. It had been there so long it had learned to pretend. "It is a piece of a dying man's soul," Elder Mira said. "Anchored in your scar by the force of the curse that created it. It has been feeding on your magic since you were 15 months old and using that feeding to sustain itself." The room was very quiet. "Can you remove it?" Harry asked. "It can be done with elf magic," she said. "Human magic cannot safely remove a soul fragment. Elf magic operates on different principles. It does not negotiate with dark anchors. It simply," she made a small precise gesture, "does not acknowledge their claim." "What does that mean for the piece of soul?" "It will leave. It cannot survive in a magical signature that does not recognize its authority." She looked at him steadily. "You will have a scar. The scar will remain. But it will be only a scar." "Okay," Harry said. "Harry Potter," Dobby said, very quietly, from beside him. "Dobby will hold on." "I know," Harry said. Elder Mira placed both hands on either side of Harry's head, not quite touching, and the silver light intensified until the sitting room was washed entirely white, and Vernon Desley made a strangled noise from the kitchen and Petunia said nothing at all, and Harry Potter felt the thing in his scar begin to scream. It was not a sound anyone else could hear. It was entirely internal, a howling wordless rage, and it clawed at him as it went, this fragment of something that had been patient for 6 years and was now discovering that patience had a limit. Harry held the arms of the chair. Dobby's hand tightened on his wrist. He set his teeth and breathed through it, and it felt like being turned inside out, and then suddenly, with a completeness that was almost physical in its shock, it was gone. Harry sat in the chair and breathed. The room smelled like ozone. Every mirror in the house had cracked. The lights had gone out and come back on twice. Outside, Dumbledore's protective wards, which Harry had not known existed, which had been built on top of the compulsions that no longer existed, buckled, shuddered, and came apart like scaffolding after the building is already gone. On Privet Drive, every garden light went dark for exactly 3 seconds. In Azkaban prison, a man named Sirius Black sat up in his cell as if pulled by a wire, because a loyalty reroute he had not known was embedded in the back of his skull suddenly snapped free with an almost audible crack, and for the first time in 3 years his thoughts came to him in the right order, and he knew, with a certainty he could not explain and did not need to, that Harry was alive. And something in it was different now. Something in it was awake. Elder Mira stood at the window and looked out at the dark street for a long moment after it was done. "The wards are gone," she said. "Yes," Dobby said. Dobby suspected they would be. They were built to contain him. Not to protect him. She didn't say it with heat. She said it the way you state the height of a mountain, a fact, simply dimensioned. The compulsions were the foundation. The wards rested on top of them. "Without the foundation, the house is not safe," Dobby said. "No." She turned from the window. "It is not safe in other ways too." Her silver eyes moved to Petunia, still standing in the kitchen doorway. "How long has the child been sleeping in a cupboard?" Petunia's face went through several expressions very quickly. "I don't see what that has to, how long?" The question wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. Petunia's mouth closed. Then she said, very quietly, "Since he came to us." Which was when he was 15 months old. Silence. Dobby looked at Elder Mira. Elder Mira looked at Petunia for a long moment, and there was nothing vengeful in it, which was somehow worse than if there had been. There was only assessment, the look of someone deciding what a thing is worth and finding it precisely measured. "Harry Potter will not be returning to this house," Elder Mira said. "You can't just," Vernon started. "I can," she said. She turned to look at him, and Vernon Dursley, who was 6 feet and 20 stone of aggressive confidence, stopped speaking and did not start again. The Elf Council holds sovereign authority over all magical compulsions within Britain. 33 compulsions were placed upon this child. The placement of those compulsions affected not only him but every environment he inhabited. A pause. Including the people in that environment. Something shifted in Petunia's face. It was complicated and Harry couldn't read all of it, but one part of it was a sudden terrible wondering, and it made him look at his aunt differently, just for a moment, before he wasn't sure what to do with that and looked away. "Harry Potter," Elder Mira said, and Harry looked up. "You are coming with us tonight. You will be taken to Elf Sanctuary, which is sovereign territory. You will be safe there. You will be able to choose what happens next." She held his gaze. "This is a choice. I am not compelling you." Harry thought about his cupboard. He thought about the crack in the skirting board where he kept the page with his birthday on it. He thought about the porridge this morning and the way Petunia hadn't met his eyes. He thought about the thing that had been living in his scar, feeding on him, for 5 years. "Can Dobby come?" he asked. Dobby made a sound like a pressure valve releasing. "Yes," Elder Mira said. "Dobby is the one who found you. Dobby goes where Harry Potter goes, until Harry Potter says otherwise." Harry stood up from the armchair. His hands had stopped glowing, or rather, the glow had settled, retreated to something barely visible, a warmth just under the surface of his skin that he could feel humming if he paid attention. It was his. It was only his. He had no framework to understand how different that was because he'd never felt it before, but his body understood it, and something in his posture changed, a straightening that wasn't about height, that came from somewhere deeper than spine. He was 6 years old and he looked at Vernon Dursley and he said, clearly, "I'm going now." Vernon said nothing. Harry walked to the door. He didn't take anything from the cupboard. There was nothing in it worth taking. Dobby walked beside him, and the council elves fell in around them, and Elder Mira held open the front door and the night air came in warm and smelling of roses and cut grass and something else, something electrical and wild that Harry recognized as the afterbreath of magic, the way the air smells after lightning even when the storm has passed. Harry stepped out onto Privet Drive. Behind him, Petunia said his name. Just his name, nothing attached to it, no instruction or admonishment. He didn't turn around. He stood on the path for a moment and felt the night and felt his own hands and felt the staggering unfamiliar lightness of a magic that was entirely and for the first time his own, and then he walked forward, and the council elves walked with him, and Dobby walked at his side with his chin up and his enormous eyes bright, and somewhere in Azkaban a wrongly imprisoned man was sitting against a wall with tears running down his face thinking I knew it, I knew he was alive, I knew it, I always knew it, and the protective wards of number 4, Privet Drive dissolved behind them into the summer air, leaving only the house, the dark, and the Dursleys standing in their own sitting room looking at the space where a child had been. The crack in the skirting board, when Petunia checked it the next morning, she checked it, though she couldn't have said precisely why, still held the folded page from the almanac. She stood in the cupboard with it in her hand for a long time. She didn't tell Vernon. She put it in her pocket. They walked to the end of the street, 7 council elves and 1 house elf and 1 6-year-old boy with green gold magic sitting just under his skin, and then Elder Mira turned to Harry and said, "You will need to hold Dobby's hand for this part." "Where are we going?" Harry asked. "Somewhere safe," she said. "Somewhere that belongs to us. No human law applies there, no human magic can touch it, and no one," she looked at him, "no one has any claim on you there. Not Dumbledore. Not the Ministry. Not the memory of Voldemort." She said the name without flinching, and Harry noted that, filed it away. The only person with any claim on Harry Potter, from this moment forward, is Harry Potter. Harry put his hand in Dobby's hand. Dobby's fingers wrapped around his and held on. "Okay," Harry said. The world folded. It was not like being squeezed through a tight space, which was how Harry had heard people describe apparition. It was more like being the center point of something vast wheeling around you, stars and deep dark and a rushing warmth, and then it resolved, and the world unfolded again, and Harry Potter was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere with trees so tall he couldn't see their tops. Somewhere with air that tasted like cold water and old stone and something sweet he couldn't name. Somewhere with lights that hung between the branches like captured fireflies, gold and patient. And across the grass, real grass, soft and dark, nothing like the Dursleys' manicured lawn, there was a long low building made of something that was not quite stone and not quite wood, its windows warm with light. Harry stood and looked at it. "Home," Dobby said softly, beside him, though Harry understood it wasn't quite that, it was Dobby using the word to mean safety, to mean a place where they will not hurt you, to mean everything the actual word home was supposed to mean and had never, for either of them, reliably delivered. Harry tightened his hand around Dobby's. "All right," he said. He sounded steadier than he felt, but only by a small margin, and the margin was closing. "Let's go in." They walked toward the light together. At number 4, Privet Drive, the house settled into the specific quiet of a place that has been important and isn't anymore. Vernon turned off the lights and went upstairs without speaking. Petunia sat in the sitting room until the clock read 2 in the morning, and she sat with her hands in her lap and the folded page in her pocket, and she thought about 33 and she thought about 15 months old and she thought about a crack in a skirting board. She thought about the moment, years and years ago, when her sister had first shown her a piece of real magic, a flower, opened by breath and attention alone, and the look on Lily's face, which had been joy, simple and uncomplicated, and how Petunia had not said wonderful but had said nothing at all, because saying wonderful would have meant saying and so are you, and she hadn't been able to bear it. She sat with all of that for a long time. Then she turned out the light and went upstairs and said nothing to Vernon, and she would not say anything to Vernon, and this was both a kindness and a cowardice, and she knew the difference and bore it. Outside, the last trace of Dumbledore's wards faded from the air like the afterglow of something that had burned out, and Privet Drive was just a street, and number 4 was just a house, and the cupboard under the stairs was just a cupboard. Harry was already somewhere else. Chapter 2, What the Bones Remember. Harry slept for 14 hours. He didn't mean to. He lay down on the bed, a real bed, wider than his cupboard, with sheets that smelled like cedar and something faintly herbal, and told himself he would just rest his eyes for a moment, because there was too much happening to sleep properly, because he needed to stay alert, because, and then he was simply gone, dropped into the deepest sleep of his 6 years of living, and he didn't dream. When he woke, it was afternoon. Gold light came through windows he didn't recognize in a room he'd never been in, and for 3 full seconds he lay completely still with his heart going very fast before the previous night came back in pieces, Dobby's amber glow, Elder Myra's silver eyes, the thing in his scar that had screamed as it left, and his heart slowed again. He sat up. The room was not large, but it was more than he'd ever had. Stone walls, warm-toned, with the particular smoothness of something grown rather than carved. The bed. A window seat. A small table with a pitcher of water and a cup and what appeared to be a bowl of fruit. On the floor beside the bed, curled like a cat in a pool of light, was Dobby, asleep with his knees tucked to his chest and his enormous ears folded down like a sleeping dog's. Harry looked at him for a moment. Then he got up carefully so as not to wake him, and poured himself a cup of water, and sat on the window seat. Outside was everything he'd glimpsed last night but couldn't fully take in, a forest that didn't behave the way forests were supposed to, its trees too tall and too old, the light between them falling at angles that didn't correspond to a single source. There were other buildings among the trees, the same not quite stone not quite wood as this one, and paths between them, and here and there elves moving between buildings with the purposeful quiet of people who have been doing the same things for a very long time in a place that is entirely theirs. It was, Harry thought, the least frightened he had ever felt in an unfamiliar place. He sat with that for a while, turning it over, trying to understand it. Harry Potter is awake. He looked over. Dobby was sitting up, blinking, his ears reinflating to their full size. There was a crease from the floor across one cheek and his pillowcase had gone askew, but his eyes were clear and immediately alert. "You slept on the floor," Harry said. "Dobby wanted to be close," Dobby said, without any particular embarrassment. In case Harry Potter woke in the night and did not know where he was. Harry thought about that. About someone sleeping on the floor beside him so he wouldn't be frightened if he woke. He'd lived with the Dursleys for 5 years and that had never once occurred to any of them. "Thank you," he said. Dobby blinked. His ears went very slightly pink at the tips. Harry Potter is thanking Dobby. Yeah. Harry Potter does not, Dobby is not used to, Dobby stopped. Pressed his lips together. Then he said, very quietly, "Harry Potter is very welcome." They sat together for a moment in the afternoon light. "Dobby," Harry said. "Last night. The 33 things. Can you explain them to me? Properly?" Dobby went still in a different way than before, not frightened still, but thinking still, the way a very responsible person goes still when they are deciding how much truth is appropriate. "All of it," Harry said. "I'm not going to break." Dobby looked at him. Then he nodded, slowly. "Dobby will explain everything. But Elder Mira is wishing to speak with Harry Potter this afternoon. Perhaps it is better if she explains the larger pieces. She knows more of the politics." "What about the smaller pieces?" "The smaller pieces," Dobby said carefully, "Dobby can explain." He paused. "The smaller pieces are the ones that hurt most to hear." Elder Mira came for Harry at the 3rd hour of the afternoon. She looked exactly as she had at midnight on Privet Drive, composed, unhurried, the silver eyes taking in the room and Harry and the window and Dobby with equal and impartial attention. She had a second elf with her, younger looking, with amber eyes and a robe the color of burnt copper, who introduced himself as Archivist Fun and carried a flat stone tablet that hummed faintly and appeared to be some form of recording device. "How do you feel?" Elder Mira asked. Harry considered the question honestly. "Lighter," he said. Then, because that sounded strange, like something I was carrying got put down. "That is accurate." She sat across from him, and Archivist Fun settled near the door, and Dobby positioned himself beside Harry with the air of someone who has chosen a side and is not interested in discussing it. "I want to explain what we found last night. All of it. Some of it will be difficult to hear." "Dobby said that too," Harry said. "I don't need it made easier." Elder Mira looked at him with something that was not quite approval and not quite surprise, it was more like recognition, the look of someone who expected to find a particular thing and has confirmed its existence. "No," she said. "I don't imagine you do." She placed her hand on the stone tablet and it lit from within, and on its surface appeared something that looked like a constellation, dozens of small lights connected by lines, dense and overlapping, some brighter than others. Harry understood without being told that this was a map of what had been in him. 33 loyalty reroutes, Elder Mira said. "We have catalogued all of them by source, by depth, by age, and by function." She pointed to the brightest cluster at the center of the map. "These 7 were placed by Albus Dumbledore between your 15th month of life and your 5th year." Harry looked at the 7 lights. They were the biggest, brightest points on the whole map. What did they do? Taken together, they accomplished several things. The deepest one, placed when you were 15 months old, almost certainly cast in the immediate aftermath of Voldemort's attack, was a compulsion for docility and self-sacrifice. It told your magic, at the level of its very foundation, that the appropriate response to threat was endurance rather than resistance. That your safety was less important than outcomes you hadn't chosen. That the correct thing to do with power was offer it up. She said each thing with the same measured care. This is why you never fought back. Not because you were weak. Because you were told, at the most fundamental level, not to. Harry sat with that. He was 6. He didn't have the vocabulary for what he was feeling, not fully, but he understood the shape of it, a vast retroactive anger, applied backward across his whole life, at every flinch and every silence and every time he'd made himself small and thought it was just what he was. Who else? He asked. 5 more from Dumbledore. Compulsions to trust his judgment. To feel loyalty to specific individuals he designated. To perceive certain people as threats and certain people as safe, regardless of evidence. She paused. One of the 5 was a memory suppression, placed at 22 months. There are things you should be able to remember from that age that you cannot. Like what? Your parents, she said. Simply. Their faces. Their voices. He suppressed your earliest memories of them. We believe, Archivist Fun has studied this specifically, that this was done to prevent you forming a strong independent emotional identity rooted in your biological family. A child who remembers being loved by his parents is harder to redirect. The room was quiet. Dobby's hand found Harry's wrist and held it. Harry looked at the stone tablet. He looked at the 7 bright lights. He's Dumbledore, he said. He's supposed to be the good one. Yes, Elder Mira said. She did not try to contextualize it or soften it. He is considered good. He may in fact believe himself to be acting for good reasons. These 2 things are not contradictions. They are, in fact, the most dangerous possible combination. Harry thought about that. Then he pointed to a cluster of 3 lights near the edge of the map. What are those? Those are ministry compulsions. One is the perception filter we removed last night, the one suppressing your accidental magic displays. One is a tracking compulsion, placed on all children of notable magical families, ostensibly for monitoring underage magic. The third is more interesting. Archivist Fun leaned forward slightly. It is a compulsion toward ministry authority. A general bias, implanted in children of powerful families, designed to make them more likely to defer to ministry judgment in cases of conflict. He said it with the clinical interest of someone who finds malfeasance fascinating in a professional capacity. It appears to have been standard practice from roughly 1970 until at least 1990. We are currently determining how many children were affected. Harry stared at him. They put it in loads of children. Yes. Does anyone know? They will, Elder Mira said. Harry looked back at the map. What's the one in the middle? The one that's separate from all the others? The room went slightly quieter. That, Elder Mira said, was what was in your scar. Which we have already removed. She held his gaze. You felt it go. Yeah. He had. He remembered it clearly. You called it a piece of someone's soul. A Horcrux, Archivist Fun said, then seemed to consider whether the word needed context. A human dark magic construct. A fragment of a soul anchored to an object, or in this case, to a scar, in order to prevent the soul's complete death. Lord Voldemort made several. This was one of them, and it was unintentional, a side effect of the curse rebounding onto him. But it was real, and it was in you, and it had been feeding on your magical core since you were 15 months old. So he had a piece of himself inside me. Yes. For 5 years. Yes. Harry looked down at his hands. His magic was still there, he could feel it, green gold and humming, entirely distinct from anything the night before. It didn't feel violated or diminished. It felt, if anything, furious in the same way young fire is furious, not directed yet, not weaponized, just burning because that's what fire does. Is it gone? He asked. Completely gone. Completely, Elder Mira said. Elf magic does not negotiate with dark constructs. It does not absorb them or transform them. It simply withdraws recognition of their claim, and anything that survives only because of its claim on a host, she made the small precise gesture he remembered from the night before, ceases to survive. Did it go anywhere? A fragment of soul that cannot anchor dies, she said. It is not destroyed in a violent sense. It simply unravels. It becomes part of the background magic of the world, which it should have done 40 years ago when Voldemort first fragmented himself. She paused. He will feel it. The loss of an anchor is not something a fractured soul misses subtly. He is currently in a very weak state, barely corporeal, attached to a host somewhere in Eastern Europe. The loss of this anchor will have set him back considerably. But he's alive. After a fashion. Yes. Harry nodded slowly. He had expected to feel something large about this, fear, or horror, or the weight of importance, but what he felt instead was practical. Almost businesslike. He was 6 years old and he had just learned that a dark wizard's soul fragment had been living in his head, and his primary response was to want to understand the situation clearly. He filed that response away somewhere and looked back at the map. What's the rest of them? The other ones? The remaining 22 reroutes are smaller, Archivist Fan said. Several from individuals who would be considered well-meaning, a minor compulsion from an aura, placed during a magical field assessment when you were 3, designed to make you compliant during any future questioning. One from a magical creature registry employee who apparently felt it appropriate to tag children of notable lineage similarly to registered creatures. He said this last part with a flatness that conveyed more contempt than most people could achieve with direct insult. Several appear to be residual effects of magical contracts involving your family, reaching back to your grandparents' generation. And the last ones? Harry pressed. Dobby made a small sound. The last 8, Elder Mira said carefully, are from your time at Privet Drive. She held his gaze. They are not intentional compulsions. They are the accumulated magical residue of sustained emotional suppression, when a magical child is consistently told what they cannot be, cannot feel, cannot do, by people in a position of authority, the magic begins to internalize it. These are not reroutes placed by a wand. They are reroutes carved by years of a particular kind of treatment. The room was very quiet. Harry looked at the map. He looked at the 8 small lights at the edges, and somehow those were harder to look at than all the bright deliberate ones in the center. We removed all 33, Elder Mira said. They are gone. They cannot be replaced without your knowledge and consent. The Elf Council has placed a protective seal on your magical signature, not a compulsion, not a reroute, nothing that restricts you. A seal that will cause any future attempt to place a compulsion on you to rebound on the caster, visible to every elf in Britain and automatically recorded in our archives. She paused. No one will try twice. Harry looked up at her. What happens now? That, she said, is the question we need to discuss. They talked for 2 hours. Elder Mira was precise and she was thorough and she did not condescend, which was something Harry noted because adults almost always condescended. She talked about the Elf Council's authority, which was ancient and largely ignored by the human magical government because ignoring it was easier than acknowledging its implications. She talked about the right of magical claim, a piece of elf law that predated the Ministry of Magic by 4 centuries, which allowed the Council to intervene in cases of magical violation and to demand legal redress. She talked about what would happen when the Ministry discovered Harry was gone from Privet Drive, which would be soon, because Dumbledore's monitoring systems, the ones built on top of the wards that no longer existed, would report an absence. They'll come looking, Harry said. They will attempt to, Elder Mira said. The sanctuary is sovereign territory. Human magical law has no jurisdiction here. Dumbledore and the Ministry may stand at the border and talk loudly. They may not enter. But they'll want me back. Yes. You are a significant political symbol and a focus of prophecy and the nominal subject of several magical contracts, and they have spent 6 years arranging everything around your eventual use. She said it bluntly, a scalpel rather than a bludgeon. They will want you back very much. We will not give you back. You can't keep him if he doesn't want to stay, Dobby said. He said it carefully, respectfully, but he said it, and Elder Mira looked at him with what Harry was beginning to recognize as the closest she came to warmth. No, she agreed. Dobby is correct. Harry Potter is not a prisoner or a ward. He is a free individual under Elf Council protection, which is different in every meaningful way. If Harry Potter chooses to leave the sanctuary, the Council cannot prevent him. We can advise. We can protect. We cannot own. She looked at Harry. You understand the difference? Yeah, Harry said. I do. He understood it in his bones, actually, in the specific way you understand things when their opposite has been your whole life. Dobby understood it too, he suspected, from a different angle, a creature built and bound for centuries for one kind of relationship, now navigating what another kind felt like. There is one more thing, Elder Mira said. She exchanged a look with Archivist Fun that Harry caught and filed away. One of the 33 reroutes, when it was removed, had a secondary effect that we did not anticipate. What effect? It was a loyalty reroute, she said. One that had been placed on multiple people connected to you, not only on you. When we removed your anchor point for that particular reroute, it freed the people on the other end, Harry said. Elder Mira paused. Looked at him. Yes. How many people? Several, she said. Most of them experienced only a small shift, a slight reorientation of existing loyalties, nothing dramatic. But one person was affected significantly. She held his gaze. His name is Sirius Black. Harry didn't know that name. He looked at Dobby, who was watching him with those enormous eyes. He is your godfather, Dobby said softly. Your mother and father's closest friend. He was supposed to be your guardian when your parents were killed. What happened to him? He was put in Azkaban, Elder Mira said. For crimes he did not commit, without a trial, based largely on witness testimony from one person who had every reason to lie and was himself bound by several reroutes that made it impossible for him to resist doing so. She set her hands flat on the table. The full story is long and your godfather will want to tell it to you himself. What matters now is that when his reroute was freed last night, his mind cleared enough for him to communicate. From Azkaban. Elves can hear certain kinds of magical distress, Archivist Fun said. He was tapping one finger against the stone tablet, which Harry had come to recognize as his tell for genuine excitement. What Sirius Black transmitted last night was not exactly a message. It was more like an echo, an emotional pulse, cleared of distortion. We received it. We know what it contained. What did it contain? Harry asked. Dobby answered. He thought about you, he said. He thought about you, and he was not afraid, and he knew you were alive, and he was very angry at the right people. He paused. Dobby thinks that last part is important. He was angry at the right people. Harry sat quietly for a moment. Then he said, "Is he okay?" The question landed in the room and the answer was written in the small silence before Elder Mira spoke. He is alive, she said. He is not well. 3 years in Azkaban with a loyalty reroute suppressing his clearest thoughts, no. He is not well. But the reroute is gone now, and his mind is his own again, and we are pursuing his case under the right of magical claim. She looked at Harry steadily. He will be out of Azkaban before winter. Harry nodded. He turned the name over in his mind, Sirius Black, and tried to find anything to attach it to. He couldn't. Whatever memories he had of his parents' world before Privet Drive were all gone, suppressed, and he had no access to them. He knew he should probably feel more about this than he did, but what he felt was mostly practical again. A person who was supposed to be his family was in a prison he didn't deserve, and they were going to get him out. Good. Get him out. Then figure out the rest. Can I walk around? He asked abruptly. Elder Mira blinked. I beg your pardon. The sanctuary, Harry said. Can I walk around it? I've been inside since I got here and I'd like to see it. Elder Mira looked at him for a moment, and then she did something Harry hadn't seen her do yet. She smiled. It was small and quick and transformed her face entirely, something unguarded moving through it for just a second before the composure settled back. "Yes," she said. "Dobby will take you." The sanctuary was larger than it looked from the window. What appeared from Harry's room to be a cluster of buildings in a forest was in fact a working community, 100 elves, maybe more, going about their business with the particular efficiency of people who have never had to perform their labor for anyone else's approval. There were workshops where things were made, Harry couldn't always tell what, but he could feel the magic on them, specific and purposeful. There were gardens that grew things Harry had no name for, plants that moved and responded to attention, that glowed faintly at the root, that smelled like things he associated with good feelings and couldn't trace to a specific memory. Dobby walked beside him and named things when Harry asked and was silent when Harry didn't, which was exactly the right approach. "How old is this place?" Harry asked, watching an elderly elf coax something green and luminous out of a pot of dark soil. "Older than Hogwarts," Dobby said. "Older than the Ministry. Older than most human magical institutions in Britain." He paused. "Elves have been in Britain a very long time. Humans came later and were very loud and built a lot of things very quickly, and eventually humans and elves made agreements. Most humans have forgotten what those agreements were. But the Council remembers. The Council remembers everything." Dobby said it without particular drama, as a simple fact. "That is partly what Archivist Fun does. He maintains the memory. He knew about the Ministry compulsions because they are in the records. He knew about Sirius Black because that story is in the records. He knew about Harry Potter's parents because," he stopped. "Because what?" Dobby was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because Lily Potter asked the Elf Council for something, 2 months before she died." Harry stopped walking. The elderly elf with the luminous plant glanced up briefly, then looked back at her work with the practiced discretion of someone who knows how to be elsewhere in a crowd. "What did she ask for?" Harry said. "She asked for a wellness watch on Harry," Dobby said. She knew, she suspected, that something was being planned around her son. There were things Dumbledore had said and not said, and she was very clever, Harry Potter's mother, she noticed the gaps between things. She came to the council and she asked that if something happened to her, and Harry survived, that an elf keep watch over him. He paused. Elder Mira agreed. Harry's chest was very tight. "So you were," Dobby volunteered, Dobby said. Dobby was still bound to the Malfoys. Dobby could not do much. But Dobby could watch. Dobby watched for 5 years. His voice didn't waver, but his hands, Harry noticed, were clenched very tightly together. Dobby watched and Harry Potter was, he stopped. Swallowed. And Dobby should have called the council sooner. Dobby knew something was wrong. Dobby just thought, his voice did waver then, just slightly, Dobby thought it might not be bad enough to justify. Dobby thought perhaps Dobby was overreacting. Dobby was wrong, and Dobby is very sorry, Dobby, Harry said. Dobby should have, Dobby. Harry turned to face him. He was 6 years old and Dobby was ancient by comparison, and he had absolutely no idea what the correct thing to say was, but he said the true thing instead. "You came. You found the scan. You called the council. You slept on the floor so I wouldn't be frightened." He held Dobby's gaze. "You came." Dobby looked at him. His enormous eyes were very bright. "Harry Potter's mother," he said at last, very quietly, "would be extremely proud." Harry didn't say anything to that. He couldn't. But he stood there in the sanctuary garden with the strange luminous plants and the evening light coming golden through the old trees, and he didn't need to say anything, because Dobby already knew. They heard the disturbance from the eastern border just before dinner. It started as a low vibration in the ground, not an earthquake, something more deliberate, a repeated pressure like knocking, but on a magical frequency rather than a physical one. The elves in the garden looked up. Dobby's ears went straight. "What's that?" Harry asked. "Someone at the border," Dobby said. His voice had gone very careful. Someone using human magic. Quite a lot of it. Dumbledore? Dobby thinks yes. Harry stood there for a moment. The knocking came again, patient, measured, the knock of someone who considers themselves entitled to an answer. Come on, Harry said. Dobby looked alarmed. Harry Potter, I want to see. He was already walking. I'm not going to do anything. I just want to see him. They walked to the eastern border, which marked itself not with a wall or a fence but with a change in the quality of the air. On one side, the sanctuary's deep old magic, warm and sovereign; on the other side, the ordinary magical atmosphere of rural Britain, which felt thin and grey by comparison now that Harry had something to measure it against. On the other side of the border, Albus Dumbledore stood alone. He was exactly what Harry had no memory of, tall, white-bearded, magnificent in a way that was clearly intended to be magnificent, robes the color of midnight and a hat that nobody needed but wore anyway. He had a wand in his hand, lowered, not threatening, and he was looking at the border with an expression that Harry, even from behind the invisible line, could read without difficulty. He was surprised. Not at the sanctuary, at something else. At the quality of the border, maybe, or at the fact that his knocking hadn't been answered with anything except more silence. He was a man used to being answered, Harry could see that immediately. He wore his certainty like the robes, deliberately, with attention to how it looked. And then his eyes found Harry. They moved across the border, past several adult elves who had gathered at a respectful distance, and landed on a 6-year-old boy with untidy black hair and green eyes and a scar on his forehead, standing just inside the tree line with a house elf at his side and absolutely nothing afraid in his face. Dumbledore's expression did something complicated. Harry, he said. His voice was warm and deep and it carried across the border without difficulty, and Harry recognized immediately that it was a voice designed to be trusted, tuned like an instrument for that precise effect. Hello, Harry said. I have been very worried about you, Dumbledore said. Harry thought about Elder Mira saying, he may in fact believe himself to be acting for good reasons. He thought about the 7 bright lights on the stone tablet map. He thought about a 15-month-old baby and a compulsion for docility. I know, Harry said. We found your reroutes. Silence. Complete, total silence, and Dumbledore's face did not move at all, and that stillness was its own kind of answer. I see, he said at last. There were 7 of yours, Harry said. His voice was very steady. Out of 33 total. The biggest one you put in when I was 15 months old. It told my magic that the correct thing to do with a threat was to survive it quietly instead of fighting back. He paused. Was that on purpose? Dumbledore looked at him for a long, long moment. Harry, he said carefully, these are very complex matters for someone your age. I'm not asking you to explain the complexity, Harry said. I'm asking if it was on purpose. Another silence. And here was the thing about Dumbledore, Harry would think later, the thing that was both terrible and true. He didn't lie. He stood at the border of the elf sanctuary in the fading evening light and he did not say no it wasn't or I don't know what you're talking about, because he was not a man who lied, not directly. He was a man who chose his truths carefully and built very persuasive things out of the arrangement. The decisions I made, Dumbledore said, were made with the intent to keep you safe. To protect you until you were old enough, that's not what I asked. Harry, was it on purpose? Harry said, flat and clear, and the green gold light was barely visible at his hands and he wasn't reaching for it, it was just there, because it had nothing suppressing it anymore. Dumbledore looked at him. Something in the great composed face cracked, very slightly, like a very old painting when the temperature changes. Yes, he said quietly. It was. The trees were still. The border hummed with its old sovereign magic. Several elves stood at a respectful distance with the expressions of people who are witnessing something and will remember it precisely. Harry nodded. Okay, he said. Thank you for being honest. He turned away from the border. He can stay there tonight if he wants, he said to Dobby, quiet enough that it didn't carry. He can come in tomorrow, Elder Mira said, if he leaves his wand. We can talk more then. And if he doesn't leave his wand? Dobby asked. Harry shrugged. Then he doesn't come in. They walked back through the trees toward the lights of the sanctuary, and behind them, across the border, Albus Dumbledore stood in the growing dark with his hands at his sides and watched a 6-year-old boy walk away from him with perfect calm, and perhaps for the first time in a very long time, Albus Dumbledore had absolutely no idea what was going to happen next. That feeling, which he had not felt in decades, sat in his chest all night like a stone. It was the most honest thing he'd felt in years. Harry ate dinner at a long table with 17 elves he didn't know yet and Dobby at his elbow translating the names of foods and occasionally whispering context for things being discussed around the table, the border monitoring schedule, a request from the Goblin Bank regarding the sanctuary's sovereign status. 3 separate pieces of news from the wizarding world that had apparently gone very strange today in ways connected to Harry's extraction. He ate something that tasted like warm bread and herbs and something impossible to name. He drank something cold and sweet. He listened to the conversation and the language of it, elf speech that mixed with English fluidly, and he noticed things, the way decisions were made here, not by one authority pronouncing judgment but by a rapid exchange of information and opinion that resolved, somehow, into clarity. The way everyone's knowledge was treated as relevant. The way Elder Mira, when she spoke, was listened to not because she commanded it but because she was usually right and everyone knew it and acknowledged it openly. He thought about the Dursleys' dinner table. The way Vernon talked and everyone else arranged themselves around the noise of his opinions. He thought, this is how it's supposed to work. After dinner, Dobby walked him back to his room and stood at the door with a slightly uncertain air, as if he was not sure how to end the day correctly. Dobby, Harry said. You don't have to sleep on the floor. There's a window seat. Dobby's ears went pink again. Dobby does not want to impose, window seat, Harry said firmly. I'll feel better knowing you're there. This was true, and saying it out loud was strange, and after he said it there was a pause where Harry waited to feel embarrassed and instead only felt accurate. Dobby will sleep on the window seat, Dobby said. He said it in the manner of someone accepting a great honor while trying to look like it is a small one. Harry lay down in the dark. The sanctuary settled around him, the old magic of it, patient and undemanding, the breathing of a place that has existed long enough to be very sure of what it is. He thought about 33 lights on a stone tablet. He thought about Sirius Black in Azkaban, sitting up suddenly in the dark with his thoughts in the right order for the first time in years. He thought about Dumbledore standing at the border, saying yes, it was on purpose, and the weight of that honesty, and how strange it was to be angry at someone you could not call a liar. He thought about his mother going to the Elf Council 2 months before she died, because she noticed the gaps between things. He thought, she knew something was wrong. She tried to protect me. He held that thought very carefully, like something breakable, and breathed around it, and it hurt and was also the best thing he'd learned all day. Somewhere in his chest the green gold light hummed its steady rhythm. Outside, the sanctuary's ancient trees stood their watch. Dobby was already asleep on the window seat, his ears folded down, his breathing even. Harry closed his eyes. This time, he dreamed, not of darkness or small spaces or the sound of a door latching shut, but of a woman with red hair and a flower that opened in her hands, and the look on her face, which was joy, simple and uncomplicated. He didn't know, yet, who she was. He felt, somewhere beneath the not knowing, that he would. Chapter 3, The First Reckoning. Dumbledore was still there in the morning. Harry found out at breakfast when Archivist Finn came in with his stone tablet and the particular expression of someone delivering news that is not quite bad but is definitely significant. He set the tablet on the table, and on its surface was a map of the sanctuary border, and on the eastern edge of that map was a small glowing dot that had not moved in approximately 12 hours. He camped, Harry said. He did, Archivist Finn confirmed. He conjured a chair sometime around 2 in the morning. He has been sitting in it since. He has not attempted to breach the border. He has not sent messages. He has, as far as our monitoring can determine, simply been sitting there thinking. What about the ministry? Elder Mira asked from the head of the table. She had apparently been up since before dawn. There was a stack of correspondence beside her plate and she was working through it with methodical speed. 3 owls from Cornelius Fudge, addressed to the sanctuary in general. 2 from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, addressed to, Archivist Van checked his tablet, whoever is currently harboring the Potter child. 1 from Arita Skeeter at the Daily Prophet, which we did not open but which is making a sound that suggests it contains a quick quotes quill already transcribing the outside of the envelope. What did Fudge say? Harry asked. Everyone at the table looked at him. He'd noticed they did that. Whenever he spoke up, there was a brief reorientation, a recalibration, as if the adults kept being mildly surprised that he was participating rather than being managed. He didn't particularly mind. He was used to being surprising. Elder Mira held out one of the ministry letters. Harry took it and read it. It was written in the specific language of people who want to sound reasonable while making threats. Fudge expressed his deep concern for the welfare of young Harry Potter, his confidence that the Elf Council understood its responsibilities under the Magical Cooperation Accords, his certainty that this regrettable situation could be resolved through dialogue, and his anticipation of Harry's prompt and voluntary return to his designated guardians. The word voluntary had been underlined, which Harry thought said quite a lot about how voluntary it was meant to be. He set the letter down. He sounds like he's trying to politely kidnap me. That, Archivist Van said, with something approaching delight, is a very precise reading of the subtext. What are the Magical Cooperation Accords? Harry asked. A set of agreements made in 1692 between human magical institutions and non-human sovereign entities, Elder Mira said. Including the Elf Council. They were designed to formalize cooperation and mutual respect. She picked up her tea. They are also, as ministry officials invariably discover when they try to invoke them against us, somewhat more binding on the ministry than they remembered. A pause. We helped write them. Harry thought about that. So they can't actually make me leave. No. And they can't come in. Not without invitation. But they can stand outside being loud about it. Indefinitely, if they choose. She set down her tea. However, I think we should invite Fudge in. The table went slightly quiet. Why? Harry asked. Because refusing to engage with the ministry entirely allows them to construct their own narrative unchallenged. Fudge will tell the wizarding world whatever story serves him best about why Harry Potter has been removed from his home. We should let him come here and give him the facts instead. She looked at Harry steadily. And because watching Cornelius Fudge attempt to negotiate with a 6-year-old who already knows more about the situation than he does will be instructive for everyone. From down the table, one of the younger elves made a sound that was almost certainly a suppressed laugh. Dobby, beside Harry, was looking at Elder Mira with profound admiration. All right, Harry said. Invite him. And Dumbledore. Might as well do it all at once. They came at midday. Fudge arrived first, portkeyed to the sanctuary's welcome grove, where a path had been opened in the border wards, escorted by 2 ministry officials who had the look of people who very much wished they were somewhere else. He was a small, round, aggressively well-dressed man with a lime green bowler hat that he held in both hands in a way that suggested he was not sure what else to do with them. He had a smile that came and went very quickly, like something checking whether the coast was clear. He took in the sanctuary with the expression of someone who expected something less impressive and was now managing the cognitive dissonance. Then he saw Harry and the expression changed to something that was trying to be paternal and was not quite making it. Harry, my boy, he said warmly, moving forward with the hand that wasn't holding the hat extended as if for a handshake. I am so relieved to see you safe and well, Minister Fudge, Elder Mira said, stepping smoothly forward so that she was between him and Harry without it looking like that was what she was doing. Welcome to the sanctuary. Please follow me. Fudge blinked. Looked at Elder Mira. made some rapid recalculations behind his eyes. "Yes," he said. "Of course. Thank you." Dumbledore arrived on foot, from the eastern border where he had been sitting all night. Harry watched from the meeting hall doorway as he walked up the path. He looked, if possible, worse than he had at the border last night. Not physically diminished, he was still tall, still magnificent, but there was something behind his eyes that hadn't been there the previous evening, and it was the look of a man who had spent 12 hours sitting alone with his own thoughts and had found them not entirely comfortable company. He saw Harry in the doorway. Harry looked at him. Neither of them spoke. But something passed between them, an acknowledgement, nothing more, a mutual recognition that the landscape had changed and both of them knew it. Dumbledore walked past him into the meeting hall and didn't try to touch his shoulder, which Harry appreciated. The meeting hall was a long room with the sanctuary's characteristic not-quite stone walls and windows that looked out onto the old forest. Elder Mira sat at the head of a long table. Archivist Finn sat to her right with his stone tablet. Harry sat to her left, with Dobby beside him. Fudge sat across from Harry with his two ministry officials flanking him. Dumbledore sat at the far end of the table, alone, his hands folded in front of him, his wand set very deliberately on the table in front of him where everyone could see it because he'd been told to leave it outside and he'd compromised by leaving it visible, which Elder Mira noted and said nothing about, which was more effective than making a point of it. "I'll begin," Elder Mira said, without preamble. The Elf Council removed Harry Potter from number 4, Privet Drive 3 days ago upon discovering 33 magical compulsions embedded in his aura, 6 of which constituted violations under Elf sovereign law, 11 of which constituted violations under standard British magical protection statutes, and 1 of which, a Dark Soul Anchor, constituted a threat to the safety of every magical being in Britain. She looked around the table. "We have removed all 33. Harry Potter is under Elf Council protection. We are not discussing whether he returns to Privet Drive. That is not negotiable and is not on the table." Fudge opened his mouth. "I'm not finished," Elder Mira said, in a tone that was not raised and did not need to be. Fudge closed his mouth. "Under the right of magical claim, the Elf Council is formally opening proceedings against the individuals responsible for placing compulsions without consent on a child. Those proceedings will include a public tribunal. The individuals involved will be named." She paused. "All of them." The room was very quiet. Fudge's smile had entirely departed. He was looking at Elder Mira with the expression of a man who came to a negotiation and discovered it was an ambush, and was trying to decide if walking out would be better or worse than staying. He stayed. "Now," Elder Mira said, "I am happy to hear from the ministry." Fudge straightened. He'd recovered some composure, which Harry noted. He was better at this than he looked. "The ministry's position," Fudge said, "is that Harry Potter is a minor under British magical law, that his guardianship was assigned under specific magical and legal protocols, and that the removal of a minor from his designated guardians without ministry consultation is a serious matter that, his designated guardians, Elder Mira said, were selected by one individual acting outside his institutional mandate, using magical compulsions to enforce the arrangement. The guardianship was not a free legal choice. It was constructed." She held Fudge's gaze. "We can discuss the validity of a guardianship that was built on compelled behavior if you would like. I am happy to do that. I have 400 years of elf legal precedent to draw on." Fudge looked at his officials. They looked at their hands. "The ministry is also," Fudge said, trying a different angle, "deeply concerned about Harry's well-being in an unsanctioned environment. He was sleeping in a cupboard," Harry said. Everyone looked at him. Harry looked back. "At the Dursleys. I was sleeping in the cupboard under the stairs. There was no window. The door locked from the outside." He paused. "I don't know how long I was sleeping in there because I can't remember anything before age 3 very well, because there was a memory suppression on me, but I know it was at least since I was 3 because that's as far back as I can remember and I was already in the cupboard then." Fudge stared at him. "You are concerned about my well-being," Harry said. That's what I was living in. The ministry officials were both looking at the table with the fixed attention of people who are extremely interested in the grain of the wood. Fudge cleared his throat. I was not aware, no, Harry agreed. You weren't. He looked at Fudge steadily. Were you aware about the ministry compulsions? The ones placed on children of magical families from 1970 to at least 1990? The perception filter and the ministry authority bias? A silence of a different quality settled over the table. Fudge had gone quite still. Because 3 of my 33 came from the ministry, Harry said. And one of those ministry compulsions was placed on lots of children, not just me. Archivist Fun said so. How many? Every eye in the room was on Fudge. There are many ministry programs. Oversight of children's magical development is how many children, Harry said. Fudge looked at Dumbledore, and it was not a subtle look, it was the look of a man hoping someone else has an exit strategy. Dumbledore did not provide one. He was looking at Harry with an expression that had moved somewhere beyond complicated into something that was almost, and this was deeply unexpected, something that was almost wondering. As if Harry was something he had engineered and had expected to know and was instead, comprehensively, discovering. We will provide documentation to the council, Fudge said finally, which everyone in the room understood was not an answer to the question and was the best he was going to do right now. Yes, Elder Mira said pleasantly. You will. By the end of the month. She made a note on a piece of parchment that appeared from nowhere. Now. The matter of Harry Potter's guardianship going forward. The Council is requesting formal recognition of Harry Potter's status as a ward of the Elf Council, which grants him sovereign protection and removes him from the jurisdiction of the British Ministry of Magic for the purposes of personal safety and living arrangements. We are simultaneously initiating the right of magical claim proceedings for Sirius Black, which I expect will be resolved within. Sirius Black, Fudge said, sharply, and the name broke his composure more than anything else had. Sirius Black is a convicted. Sirius Black was never tried, Elder Mira said. Fudge went white. Not pale. White. That is not, the Azkaban records clearly show, the Azkaban records show he was committed, Archivist Fun said, with the precise pleasurable energy of a person deploying 4 centuries of records against someone who was hoping those records didn't exist. They do not show a trial, because there was not one. He was committed by emergency ministerial order in November 1981 and the temporary measure was never followed by formal proceedings. He looked up from his tablet. In breach of the Wizarding Justice Accords of 1792, the Magical Rights Charter of 1843, and the Azkaban committal standards established in 1901, all of which require a trial within 6 months of committal. He tilted his head. He has been in Azkaban for 3 years. The ministry officials had stopped looking at the table. They were looking at the ceiling. Fudge's mouth was open. We are initiating the right of magical claim on behalf of Sirius Black as a person whose magical signature was violated by a compulsion that affected his behavior at the time of his alleged offense, Elder Mira continued. Under the right, the council demands a formal hearing within 30 days. If the ministry fails to provide one, Elf sovereign law authorizes us to release him directly from Azkaban into council custody. She paused. I recommend the ministry provides the hearing. You can't, Fudge started. We absolutely can, Elder Mira said. Shall I quote the relevant section? Archivist Fun has it memorized. I do, Archivist Fun said helpfully. Fudge put his bowler hat on the table and rubbed both hands over his face. He was a politician, Harry had already clocked that, the way he'd come in with his warmth and his angles, but he was a politician who was used to operating in situations where he held more information and more authority than the other side, and he had arrived at this table holding neither. What, Fudge said carefully, does the council want? We've outlined what we want, Elder Mira said. Ward status for Harry Potter. A hearing for Sirius Black. Documentation of ministry compulsion programs. A public tribunal for all 33 violation cases. She folded her hands. These are not opening positions. They are our requirements. Fudge looked at Harry. Harry looked back. Fudge seemed to be trying to find an angle there, some uncertainty, some childish malleability he could work with, and finding none. He picked up his hat. "I'll need to consult with my department heads," he said. "Of course," Elder Mira said. "You have 2 weeks." After Fudge left, quickly, with the energy of a man who has many urgent fluke calls to make, the meeting hall settled into a different quality of silence. Dumbledore was still at the far end of the table. He had not spoken once during the ministry discussion, which Harry had noted. He had listened and watched with that same wondering expression, and now he sat alone at his end of the table while Elder Mira and Archivist Fun reviewed notes, and the 2 ministry officials disappeared, and Dobby stood at Harry's side. "I'll talk to him," Harry said to Elder Mira. She glanced up. "Are you certain?" "Yeah." She studied him for a moment, then nodded and gestured to Archivist Fun, and the 2 of them gathered their things and moved toward the door, and Dobby made to follow, and Harry said quietly, "You can stay if you want." Dobby planted himself by the wall like a small fierce sentinel. Harry walked to the far end of the table and sat down across from Dumbledore. Up close, the old wizard was more textured than he looked at a distance, the lines deeper, the eyes more tired, the magnificent composure slightly more effortful. He looked at Harry and his expression was complicated in the way that only very intelligent people's expressions get complicated, multiple things occupying the same space, none of them resolving into something simple. "You handled that well," Dumbledore said. His voice was quiet, not the deep carrying instrument from the border, just a voice, an old man talking in a room. "I just asked questions," Harry said. "The council had already done the work. You knew which questions to ask. Elder Mira told me things. I paid attention." He paused. "You didn't say anything. During the Fudge part. There was nothing useful I could say." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. "I have spent many years being the most informed person in a room. Today I was not. I found I had very little to contribute when deprived of that advantage." Harry looked at him. "Is that an apology?" "No," Dumbledore said honestly. "It is an observation. I owe you an apology. I have been working out how to give you one that does not," he paused, and here was the tell, Harry thought, here was the thing that would have been hidden from anyone without his current clarity. Dumbledore was not searching for words. He was searching for a framing. A way to apologize that was also, subtly, an explanation of why the thing was understandable, if not forgivable. He was so good at it that he probably didn't notice he was doing it. "That does not feel like self-justification dressed as remorse," he finished. Harry blinked. That was more honest than he'd expected. "Then don't justify it," Harry said. "Just say what you did." Dumbledore was quiet. "Say the actual thing," Harry said. "Not why. Just what." Another silence, longer. Then Dumbledore said, slowly, "I placed compulsions in your mind without your consent, beginning when you were 15 months old. I suppressed your memories of your parents. I arranged your placement in an environment I knew would not be kind to you because I believed the protection it offered was worth the cost. I made decisions about your life, very significant decisions, without consulting you, without making them reversible, without accounting for the fact that I might be wrong." He looked at Harry. "I treated you as a piece in a war instead of a person living in it." The room was very still. Harry sat with it. He was 6 years old and he was sitting with the statement that the most powerful magical figure in Britain had decided what his life was worth when he was 15 months old and had never reconsidered. He breathed through it, the way Elder Mira had told him to breathe through the reroutes coming out, feeling the full extent of it, not flinching from it, not making it smaller than it was. "Did it work?" Harry asked. "The plan. Whatever you were doing with me." Dumbledore's expression shifted. "In some ways. In ways I am now reconsidering." He paused. "You were meant to be," shaped, over many years, into someone who would be willing to. There is a prophecy about you. It says that you and Voldemort must face each other and that neither can live while the other survives, and I believe the only way to ensure you would be willing and able to face him was to shape me, Harry said. Yes. Into someone who'd be willing to die if necessary. Dumbledore's eyes closed briefly. Yes. Harry considered this. And now? Now, Dumbledore said, I am sitting in an elf meeting hall at a table where a 6-year-old just asked the Minister for Magic how many children the Ministry has violated, and I am trying to determine whether everything I planned around you is still necessary, or whether I made the plan necessary by the way I planned it. Harry stared at him. Dumbledore looked back, and there was something raw in it, not performative vulnerability, but the actual nakedness of a very intelligent man confronting the possibility that his certainty was the engine of the disaster. He had built the future around a fixed version of Harry Potter. He was looking at an unfixed version and realizing that might be his fault and also, quietly, that this version was already better. I'm not going to be shaped, Harry said. Not by you. Not by a prophecy. Not by what anyone needs me to be. He held Dumbledore's gaze and there was nothing aggressive in it and nothing trembling in it either. If Voldemort needs dealing with, I'll deal with him. On my terms. Because I choose to, not because you built me to. That, Dumbledore said, after a long moment, is more frightening and more hopeful than anything I had planned. Good, Harry said. He stood up. I'm not going to tell the council to bar you, Harry said. You can come back. You can talk. But not to me like I'm a piece you're moving, to me like I'm a person you owe things to. And the things you owe, he paused. Start with the truth. Every time. Even when the truth makes your plan look worse. Dumbledore looked up at him from across the table. Yes, he said. Just that. Not I will try or I understand, just the plain word, an agreement made by someone who understood what it was costing. Harry walked back to Dobby at the wall. They left together without looking back, and behind them Dumbledore sat alone at the long table in the meeting hall for a very long time, and nobody disturbed him, and the old forest stood outside the windows in its ancient uninterested patience, and whatever Dumbledore worked out in that silence was his own. The afternoon brought news from Azkaban. Not official news. Archivist Fun received it through what Harry was coming to understand was the Elf Communications Network, a system entirely separate from Owls or Fleur that operated on magical resonance and was therefore not interceptable by the Ministry. The news was that Sirius Black had had a second clearer episode, his mind pulling together for longer this time, whole coherent hours rather than flashes, and that the Dementors, perhaps in response to the disruption in the Sanctuary's activities or perhaps for reasons the elves understood and weren't explaining, had pulled back from his cell. He's thinking clearly? Harry asked. For longer periods each day, Archivist Fun confirmed. The reroute is fully gone. What remains is the cumulative effect of 3 years of Dementor proximity, which will take time to heal. But his base cognition is intact. He paused. He has been asking about you. What does he want to know? Whether you are all right. Archivist Fun looked down at his tablet. Whether you know about him. Whether you, a brief pause, whether you are angry at him for not being there. Harry was quiet for a moment. Can you send something back, he asked. Through the network. A simple message. Not complex. Harry thought about it. Then, tell him I know. Tell him I'm not angry. Tell him to get some sleep because we're working on getting him out. Archivist Fun looked at him. Then he wrote on his tablet, quickly, and pressed his hand flat against it, and Harry felt the pulse of elf magic carry the message outward like a stone dropping in still water, spreading in rings through the magical world. Later that evening, walking through the sanctuary with Dobby in the long blue hour before dark, Harry thought about a man in a cell who was suddenly thinking clearly for the first time in years and asking about a child he'd never been given the chance to know. What's he like? Harry asked. Sirius Black. Dobby considered. Dobby never met him. But Dobby has heard things from the Malfoys. They hated him, which is a good sign. That's a good sign. If the Malfoys hate someone, Dobby said firmly, Dobby has found that this is generally a recommendation. Harry laughed. It came out surprising him, a sudden bright thing in the evening air, and Dobby looked up at him with an expression that was pure uncomplicated joy. Your father was his best friend, Dobby said. They were, from what Dobby understands, they were very similar. Stubborn. Brave. Somewhat reckless. Very funny. He paused. Harry Potter laughs like someone who is not used to laughing but is very good at it. Harry looked at him. What does that mean? It means Harry Potter's laugh sounds like it was always going to be a good laugh. It just didn't have enough to laugh at, before. They walked on through the blue evening, and the sanctuary's lights came on one by one between the branches, and somewhere in the communications network of the elf world a message was arriving at Azkaban, settling like warmth into a cell that had been very cold for a very long time, and in that cell a man with a year's worth of matted hair and 3 years of damage in his eyes sat against the wall and read it, and his face did something complicated and necessary in private. The night was quiet until it wasn't. Harry was almost asleep when Dobby sat up sharply on the window seat. Harry was awake in an instant, one of those survivalist reflexes built by years of needing to know when something changed. He sat up. What? Something at the southern border, Dobby said. He was very still, ears extended, that quality of attention Harry associated with him receiving information on a frequency Harry couldn't hear. Not the Ministry. Not Dumbledore. His voice had changed. Something different. Different how? Dobby looked at him, and for the first time since Privet Drive, something close to fear moved through his enormous eyes. Dark magic, Dobby said quietly. Not the Malfoys. Something, he paused. Something that is not quite here. Something that is looking. Harry got up. He didn't think about it. He crossed to the window and looked out at the dark forest and saw nothing, but he felt something, now that he was paying attention, a cold thread in the warm fabric of the sanctuary's magic. Not powerful. Not like the thing that had been in his scar. But aware. Searching. Is it Voldemort? He asked. Something from him, Dobby said. Not him, he is too weak to reach this far himself. A piece of his attention. Through a vessel. A pause. Someone carrying his will. Harry stood at the window and felt the cold thread probe at the sanctuary's borders and find them, solid, ancient, impassive. The sanctuary did not respond to dark magic the way human wards did, with alarm or resistance. It simply did not acknowledge. Like Elder Mira withdrawing recognition of a claim. The cold thread touched the border and found nothing to grip and slid away. The sanctuary exhaled, settling, its old deep magic closing back like water over a stone. He knows I'm here, Harry said. It wasn't a question. He knew something changed, Dobby said. The anchor being removed. He felt that, Elder Mira said. He sent something to look. Dobby's voice was careful. Now he knows Harry Potter is not where Harry Potter was supposed to be. He knows Harry Potter is somewhere with very old magic around him. He paused. He does not know yet what that means. He will, Harry said. Yes. Harry looked at the dark forest for another moment, then turned from the window. His magic was awake under his skin, not panicked, not urgent, present. Certain of itself, the way the sanctuary was certain of itself. Dobby, he said. Tomorrow I want to start learning. Actually learning. Whatever the council can teach me. He paused. If someone's going to come for me eventually, I want to already know how to take them apart when they get here. Dobby stood up from the window seat. He was barely 4 feet tall in his pillowcase and he was old and had spent years being beaten for minor infractions, and he stood there in the dark room of the sanctuary and looked at Harry Potter and looked precisely like what he was, something that had endured a great deal and come out the other side of it not diminished but concentrated. "Dobby will talk to Elder Mira first thing," he said. "Thank you. Harry Potter should sleep." "I know. Dobby will watch the window." "I know that too." Harry lay back down. The green gold light hummed its steady rhythm under his skin, and the sanctuary breathed around him, and somewhere in the dark at the border of the old forest the last trace of Voldemort's searching attention withdrew like fog burning off in sun. It would come back. Harry knew that with the same certainty that he knew his own heartbeat. Whatever was left of Voldemort had just discovered that the plan, whatever the plan had been, had come undone. That the boy was not where they'd put him. That the boy was different, now, in ways a fractured soul pressed into someone's skull could not fully understand. Harry stared at the ceiling. Something was coming. He could feel it in the architecture of things, the way a storm is in the pressure before the rain. He closed his eyes. He felt ready. That was new. He turned it over, tested it, waited for the familiar flinch to correct him, the compulsion for docility, the whisper that he should stay small and let things happen, and found nothing. Only himself. Only the steady green-gold certainty that had been there all along, waiting beneath 33 chains for someone to cut them loose. He breathed out. Sleep came quickly, and this time the dream was different, no red-haired woman, not yet. Just light, wide and warm and directionless, and the feeling of standing in the center of it without needing to know where it led. Chapter 4, The Black Air. The hearing took 11 days. Elder Mira had said 30, and the ministry had clearly intended to use all 30, but on day 4 the Daily Prophet ran a front page that Archivist Finn brought to breakfast with the expression of someone delivering a gift they'd had a hand in arranging. The headline read, "Boy Who Lived Found in Cupboard, ELF Council Reveals Ministry Compulsion Program." The byline was not Rita Skeeter. It was a junior reporter named Barnabas Cuff who had apparently decided that the story of the decade was worth the career risk, and he had written it with the kind of clarity that comes from being handed documentation so airtight there was nothing to soften. The wizarding world, it turned out, had opinions about children sleeping in cupboards. It also had opinions about a ministry that had been quietly implanting compliance compulsions in their children for 20 years, which was the part that made people genuinely incandescent. By day 6, Fudge had 3 separate delegations of angry parents in his waiting room and a motion of no confidence being drafted in the Wisengamot. By day 8 he had agreed to a hearing for Sirius Black within the fortnight. By day 11 the date was set. Harry found out over breakfast. He set down his toast and said, "How do we prepare him?" Elder Mira looked up from her correspondence. "Prepare him? He's been in Azkaban for 3 years. He's going to walk into a Wisengamot hearing. Someone should prepare him." Harry paused. "Can we get a message to him? More than just one line through the network?" "We can send an elf advocate," Archivist Finn said. He was already writing something. "Standard right of magical claim procedure, we are entitled to send a representative to the detained party before the hearing to brief them on proceedings. I want to go." The table went quiet in the specific way it went quiet when Harry said something that surprised people. "Harry Potter," Dobby started. "He's my family," Harry said. "He's about to walk into a room full of people who put him away without a trial and he doesn't know me yet and he needs to know someone is on his side before he gets in there." He looked at Elder Mira. "I won't go inside Azkaban. I'll meet him at the ministry. Before the hearing. Can you arrange that?" Elder Mira studied him for a long moment. Her silver eyes did their precise measurement thing. Then she said, "Yes. I can arrange that." The Ministry of Magic was everything the Sanctuary was not. Where the Sanctuary was old and sure of itself, the Ministry was new and loud about it, all polished floors and gilded ceilings and fireplaces that roared green every 40 seconds as someone arrived, and witches and wizards in robes moving with the brisk self-importance of people who had convinced themselves that business was the same as purpose. Harry came through the floor with Elder Mira on one side and Dobby on the other, and the atrium went briefly quiet in a spreading wave from the fireplace outward. He was used to it by now, the looking. He didn't shrink from it. He walked across the atrium with Elder Mira and Dobby and 2 council elves who had been sent as formal representatives, and the gold statue at the center of the atrium, witches and wizards on a plinth with various magical creatures crouched below them in attitudes of submission, made him stop for exactly 3 seconds. "That's going to change," he said, "not to anyone in particular." "Yes," Elder Mira said. "It is." They were taken to a waiting room on the 4th floor that was supposed to be a hospitality suite for visiting dignitaries and was being used now as a pre-hearing anteroom. It was large and over-furnished and had a window with a view of an enchanted ceiling that was doing a reasonable impression of a cloudy autumn sky. 3 ministry officials stood near the door with the air of people who were present in an official capacity and wished they were present in any other capacity. Harry sat in one of the large chairs and waited. He heard them before the door opened, footsteps in the corridor, multiple sets, and underneath those the clink of something, and then a pause, and then a guard's voice saying something low and procedural, and then silence. The door opened. Sirius Black walked in. He was tall, that was the first thing. Even reduced by 3 years of Azkaban, even thinner than he should be, even with the particular careful way he moved that spoke of a body that had learned not to trust the space around it, he was undeniably tall. His hair was dark and very long and had not been cut in some time. His face was sharp-boned and hollow-cheeked and about 10 years older than it should have been on a man who was, Harry did the math, 23. He was in ministry-issued robes that were clearly not his, too short in the sleeve and too broad in the shoulder, and he had grey in his hair at the temples that hadn't been there before Azkaban. His eyes, though. His eyes were grey, and when they found Harry across the room they went very still in the way eyes go still when they're seeing something they've been picturing for a long time and the reality is landing on top of the image and both versions are present simultaneously. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Harry stood up from the chair. They looked at each other, the man who should have been there from the beginning and the boy who had grown 6 years without him, and the distance between them was 12 feet of over-furnished ministry carpet and also an enormous amount of everything else, and neither of them moved for a moment that stretched. Then Sirius crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees in front of Harry and put both hands on Harry's shoulders and looked at his face with an intensity that was barely holding itself together. "Hi," Harry said. Sirius made a sound that was not a word. He pulled Harry into a hug that was clearly not a composed or measured hug. It was the hug of someone who has been imagining this for 3 years and is now doing it and does not know how to make it feel like enough. He was shaking, faintly, the way buildings shake in wind. Harry had never been hugged like this. He had been hugged by no one, actually, not in any memory he had access to, and the full-body grip of it, the being held by someone who specifically wanted to hold him, was so unfamiliar that for a moment he just stood in it, arms at his sides, not sure what to do. Then he put his arms around Sirius and held on. Sirius made a different sound. Quieter. More destroyed and more okay at the same time. They stood there for a moment while 3 ministry officials looked at the wall and Dobby pressed his knuckles to his mouth and Elder Mira stood perfectly still with something moving through her silver eyes that she kept to herself. Then Sirius pulled back and held Harry at arm's length and looked at him again. "You have James's hair," he said. His voice was rough, not quite steady. "Exactly James's hair." He stopped. Pressed his lips together. Tried again. "And Lily's eyes. God, you have her eyes." "I know about them," Harry said. "A bit. Dobby told me some. I know what happened." Sirius's face moved through several things. "Then you know I didn't, I wasn't, I know," Harry said. "I know you didn't do it. The council told me about the trial that didn't happen and the reroute and all of it." He looked at Sirius steadily. "I'm not angry at you. I sent that through the network but I wanted to say it to your face." Sirius stared at him. "You're 6, he said. "Yeah. You speak like," he paused. "You're 6. Everyone keeps noticing that," Harry said. "Come on, sit down." We need to talk about the hearing before it starts, and I want to tell you what the council has prepared. They had 40 minutes before the hearing convened. Sirius sat across from Harry, and Archivist Fun walked him through the right of magical claim proceedings with the efficiency of someone who had done this preparation many times, the charges, the evidence, the specific violations of wizarding law that had been committed by his incarceration, the testimony the council was prepared to provide. Sirius listened with the slightly unfocused attention of a man whose mind was recently restored and was still recalibrating its range, but he was sharp underneath it. He asked the right questions. He remembered what he was told. Harry watched him while Fun talked. He was trying to reconcile the things he'd been told about Sirius Black, the best friend, the godfather, James Potter's shadow and co-conspirator, with the man sitting across from him, who had been scraped clean by 3 years of Azkaban and was now sitting in ministry-issue robes trying to hold himself together through concentration. There was something under the damage, though. Something that had survived Azkaban intact. A quality of presence, a specific kind of aliveness, that Harry recognized without being able to name it immediately, and then did name it. He was not afraid. Not of the hearing. Not of the ministry officials in the corner. Not even, and this was notable, of the Dementors he'd just spent 3 years with. He was damaged and unsteady and clearly running on fumes, but underneath all of it he was angry in a very clean, directionless way, and the anger was holding him upright. Harry liked that. He recognized it as related to something in himself. "They're going to try to make it about the past," Harry said, when Fun had finished. Both of them looked at him. "They're going to focus on what happened in 1981 and make you defend that, because if the whole hearing is about whether you did what they said you did, it's on their terms." He paused. "Don't let them." Sirius blinked. "What do you mean?" "Your defense isn't that you're innocent of those specific charges, even though you are. Your defense is that the whole process was illegal from the start. No trial, no evidence review, no representation. They don't get to retry the charges on better terms now because the terms were never legal." "Fun, is that right?" "That is," Archivist Fun said, "an extremely accurate reading of the council's legal strategy, yes." Sirius looked at Harry. He had the look of someone doing rapid recalibrations. "You thought of that yourself?" "Elder Mira explained the structure and I thought about how Fudge would approach it," Harry said. "He'll want to make you prove you didn't do it because that's a longer, harder road. The council's road is shorter. They shouldn't have locked you up without a trial at all, the charges are secondary." "You're 6, Sirius said again. He said it differently this time, not in a correcting way but in a wondering one. "They took the compulsions off about 2 weeks ago," Harry said. "Apparently I've been thinking like this the whole time, there was just a lot of weight on top of it." He paused. "Dad was clever, right? And Mom?" Something happened in Sirius's face. A cracking, a giving way, quickly controlled. "Yeah," he said, roughly. "They really were." "Then it's probably from them," Harry said. He said it practically, without sentiment, but there was something in how he said it, the matter-of-fact claiming of a lineage he had only just been given access to, that made Sirius press his mouth into a line and look away for a moment. One of the ministry officials cleared their throat. 5 minutes, they said. Sirius looked back at Harry. He straightened, visibly, something resolving in his face, the shaking stopped, the hollowness found something to organize around. "All right," he said. "Shortest road. Don't let them make it about the specific charges." "And afterward," Harry said, "you're coming to the sanctuary." Sirius stared. "Elder Mira has already arranged it. If the hearing goes how it should go, and it will, the council has 4 centuries of legal precedent, you'll be free by this afternoon. And you're coming to the sanctuary." Harry held his gaze. "I'm not going back to the Dursleys. I need a guardian. You're my godfather." Seemed straightforward. Something broke open in Sirius Black's face. It was not subtle. The composure went entirely for a moment, replaced by something raw and overwhelmed and quietly furious at every single circumstance that had made this conversation necessary, that had put them in this ministry room 3 years too late, that had made it so that a 6-year-old boy was the one being calm and certain while his godfather held himself together with both hands. "Harry," Sirius said. His voice was rough. "I should have been there from the start." "I should have, you were in Azkaban," Harry said. "Before that." "Right after." "I should have, you were set up," Harry said. "And you had a loyalty reroute on you that messed up your thinking, and the people who should have sorted it didn't, and none of that is your fault." He paused. "I'm not interested in who should have done what. I'm interested in what we do now." Sirius looked at him for a long moment. "James would have said something very similar," he said finally. "Except with more swearing." "I'm 6, Harry said. "Give me time." Sirius laughed. It was sudden and genuine and slightly broken at the edges, and it transformed his face entirely. The Azkaban years fell back for a moment and something much younger and much more alive surfaced through them. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." He stood up. "Let's go win a hearing." The Wizengamot chamber was everything it was designed to be. Tiered seats, 50 Wizengamot members in plum robes, the high bench at the front where the chief warlock and the minister sat. Dark wood and old stone and the particular gravity of an institution that had been making decisions about people's lives for centuries and was comfortable with the authority that gave it. Harry sat in the gallery with Elder Mira and Dobby and watched. Fudge was at the high bench, trying to project control of the proceedings. He was not fully succeeding. The Wizengamot had clearly been briefed on the Daily Prophet articles and on the Elf Council's legal filings, and the atmosphere in the chamber was that of a room where everyone had opinions and most of them were not in alignment with whoever was officially in charge. Sirius was brought in. He walked in with his chin level, his back straight, and the clean focused anger holding him upright, and he sat down in the chair in the center of the chamber, which had chains on it, Harry noted with cold fury, chains bolted to the arms, and the chains moved toward his wrists and then stopped, inexplicably, 6 inches away. Elder Mira made a very small sound beside Harry that might, in someone else, have been satisfaction. The chains had recognized the right of magical claim. They could not bind a person under active Elf Council proceedings. It was in the Magical Cooperation Accords, which the Ministry had signed in 1692 and had been hoping nobody would check. Fudge noticed the chains hanging loose and went slightly gray. The Council's advocate, a senior elf named Theron, who had the manner of a surgeon and the eyes of someone who had been doing this for longer than the Ministry had existed, rose and addressed the chamber. The Elf Council contests the legality of Sirius Black's incarceration on the following grounds, Theron said, in a voice that carried without effort. No trial was conducted. No evidence was formally reviewed. No legal representation was provided. The ministerial order committing him to Azkaban was a temporary measure under emergency provisions, valid for a maximum of 6 months under the Wizarding Justice Accords of 1792, which were violated when permanent incarceration was imposed without formal proceedings. Additionally, the Council presents evidence that Mr. Black's magical signature was subject to a loyalty reroute at the time of his alleged offense, which materially affected his behavior and constitutes grounds for review of any conclusions drawn from his conduct during that period. He set a file on the table in front of the bench. The Council requests immediate release. The chamber erupted. Not in chaos, in the controlled, overlapping noise of 50 people with opinions all reaching the same conclusion at slightly different speeds. Fudge raised his gavel and brought it down twice, and the noise subsided, and what replaced it was worse for Fudge, a specific quality of silence that meant the room had already decided something and was waiting for him to catch up. An elderly witch in the front row of the Wizengamot seats, Griselda Marchbanks, Harry would learn her name later, leaned forward and said, in a voice like dry paper, "Minister. Did we conduct a trial?" Fudge opened his mouth. "A yes or no will do, Minister." A pause. The emergency provisions at the time, yes or no? Another pause. No, Fudge said. The chamber did not erupt again. It went very quiet in a way that was considerably more devastating than noise. "Then I move," Griselda Marchbanks said, with the calm of someone calling a card in a game that is already over, "that we address the legality of the incarceration before we address anything else." The vote was 44 to 6. It took 90 minutes. By the end of it, three things had happened. Sirius Black had been formally declared unlawfully imprisoned, with full expungement of the charges against him. The ministry had been ordered to provide compensation under magical law for every day of unlawful incarceration, which Theron, with the particular pleasurable energy Harry was coming to associate with the Elf Council doing things it had been waiting patiently to do for a very long time, specified as including full restoration of any property, assets, or rights suspended during the period of incarceration. And Cornelius Fudge had aged approximately 5 years over the course of the proceedings and was staring at the middle distance with the expression of a man recounting all the decisions that had led him here. Sirius walked out of the chamber a free man. He walked into the corridor where Harry was waiting and he stopped. Harry looked at him. Sirius looked back. "Well," Sirius said. His voice was not quite steady. "I suppose I owe the Elf Council an enormous debt." "The Council doesn't take debts," Harry said. "Elder Mira will tell you about that. They operate on," he searched for Finn's word, "mutual sovereign respect. No hierarchies of obligation." "Of course they do," Sirius said. He was looking at Harry with that recalibrating look again. "You've been there 2 weeks. I pay attention. Clearly." Sirius crouched down to Harry's level, putting them eye to eye. Up close, freed and walking and real, the damage of Azkaban was clearer, but so was what was underneath it, something that was warm and wry and had clearly once been someone who laughed a great deal and intended to be that person again. "I want to say something and I need you to let me finish before you be practical at me." "Okay," Harry said. "I am so sorry," Sirius said. "That you had to grow up without anyone who knew your parents and loved them. That you were in that house, in that cupboard, for 5 years. That you're the one who had to tell me how the hearing should go because I was too." He stopped. "I should have been there. I know it's not entirely my fault. I know the reroute and Azkaban and all of it. But you are 6 years old and you have been taking care of yourself and working things out and holding it together, and nobody should have to do that at 6, and I am sorry it was you." Harry was quiet. "You said let me finish," Sirius said. "You finished," Harry said. "Right." Harry looked at him. He thought about the right response and couldn't find one that wasn't true. "I'm okay," he said finally. "I don't fully know yet what I missed because I can't, the suppressed memories are still gone, I can't compare. But I think," he paused, feeling for the right words, "I think the people who should have been there for me weren't, and that's a real thing, and I'm allowed to be angry about it at the right people. But you're not the right person." He held Sirius's gaze. "You tried to be my godfather and someone locked you up before you could. That's different." Sirius looked at him for a moment. "Merlin," he said softly. "You really are their kid." "Yeah," Harry said. "I really am." They arrived at the sanctuary just before sunset. Sirius came through the border wards and stopped walking on the other side and just stood there, breathing, and Harry understood, the sanctuary felt different from everything outside it in a way that hit you physically when you crossed the threshold. The weight of the air. The oldness of the magic. The specific quality of sovereign space that had never been anyone's battlefield or anyone's subject. "It feels like," Sirius started. "Like nothing's trying to own it," Harry said. "Yeah." Sirius exhaled. "Exactly like that." They gave him a room 3 doors down from Harry's. It was larger, with a window that looked into the deepest part of the forest, and Elder Mira had apparently arranged for certain things, fresh robes in his actual measurements, a long mirror, a tray of food that had been selected by someone with knowledge of what someone coming out of Azkaban needed, which was more and blander than usual. Sirius stood in the middle of the room and looked at it. "It's very nice," he said. The sheets smell like cedar, Harry offered. Do they? That's a good thing. Right. Sirius turned around slowly, taking in the room, the window, the food. I've been in a cell for 3 years, he said. I keep expecting the room to get smaller. It won't, Harry said. He was leaning in the doorway. Dobby, tell him about the sanctuary's stabilization charms. The sanctuary's physical structure is anchored to elf magic that has been maintained continuously for 800 years, Dobby said promptly from behind Harry. It does not shift or close. It is incapable of feeling confining because it is not interested in confinement. Spaces here stay what they are. Sirius stared at Dobby. Hello, Dobby said. This is Dobby, Harry said. He's the one who found the reroutes. He started all of this. Something shifted in Sirius's face when he looked at Dobby. He crouched down, as he had with Harry, bringing himself to eye level, and held out one hand. Then I owe you a specific debt that is entirely separate from whatever the council's position on debts is, Sirius said. You got him out of that house. Dobby looked at the extended hand. He looked at Sirius. He shook it, very carefully, with the air of someone handling something important. Dobby was watching, Dobby said. As Dobby was asked to by Harry Potter's mother. He paused. Dobby is sorry it took so long. You were bound to the Malfoys, Sirius said. Don't apologize. Nobody bound gets to apologize for what they couldn't do. He said it with the quiet conviction of someone who had been bound in multiple senses and had opinions about it. Dobby's ears went very slightly pink again. After dinner, the 4 of them, Harry and Sirius and Dobby and Archivist Fun, at the small table in Harry's room because the main hall felt like too much and nobody said that out loud but everyone understood, Sirius asked about the training. Fun told me you're learning elfcraft, he said to Harry. What does that actually mean? Started 3 days ago, Harry said. Elder Mira and 2 of the senior elves. It's not like wand magic, it's older, more direct. Human magic works by working out what you want and translating it through a series of, what did you call them, intermediary symbolic structures, Fun said, pouring more of the cold sweet drink. Wand, incantation, specific wand movements. The magic has to go through all of that before it acts on the world. Elfcraft goes straight from the intent to the action, Harry said. There's no translation layer. You know what you want and you reach for it and it, he held his hand up. The green gold light bloomed in his palm, steady and immediate. It just does it. Sirius stared at the light in Harry's hand. How far can you take it, he asked, with the specific voice of someone trying to sound casual about something they find extremely significant. Further than I could 3 days ago, Harry said. Elder Mira says the elfcraft training works fast because I'm not learning new magic, I'm learning to use what was already there. The compulsions were suppressing my access to my own core. Now that they're gone, training is more, he looked for the word, more like remembering than learning. Show me something. Harry looked at him. Then he looked at the window, which was slightly ajar, letting in the night air. He looked at a leaf on the nearest branch, 10 feet from the window, barely visible in the dark. The leaf turned gold. Not autumn gold. A deep amber that lit from within, the same color as Dobby's wellness scan, warm and certain, and held for 3 seconds, and then returned to its natural green. The branch did not shake. There was no visible effort. Harry put his hand back in his lap. Sirius was very quiet. Harry, he said. Do you know what a fully trained adult wizard can do at 6 years old? Not much, apparently, Harry said. Small accidental magic. Nothing directed. Right, Sirius said. He looked at Dobby and then at Fun and then back at Harry, and what was on his face was not worry and not awe exactly but the specific look of someone recategorizing something very rapidly. And you just did that. Directly. Without a wand. With precision. The compulsion suppressed everything for 5 years, Harry said. There's apparently a lot of backlog. He paused. Elder Mira says it'll take time to learn the control to match the power. That's what training is for. But the power is already there. Yeah. Sirius leaned back in his chair. He ran one hand through his hair, a gesture that Harry would come to recognize as his thinking gesture, the one that meant he was processing something large. The people who planned for you to be small and manageable, Sirius said slowly, are going to have a problem. That, Harry said, is rather the idea. Sirius looked at him. Then he laughed, fully, properly, a laugh that had nothing broken in its edges, the first real laugh Harry had heard from him, and it was startling in the best way, warm and sudden and loud enough that Dobby's ears shot straight up. James would have loved this, Sirius said. He would have been absolutely insufferable about it. He'd have been showing everyone. He'd have been, the laugh faded into something softer, sadder, but not swallowed. Just present. Held at the right size. He would have been so proud. Harry looked at him. He thought about the dream, the red-haired woman, the flower, the joy on her face. He thought about 33 chains, and what was underneath them, and the word backlog. Tell me about him, Harry said. My dad. Whatever you remember. All of it. He paused. And Mum. Sirius looked at him across the small table in the warm light of the sanctuary room. Yeah, he said. Okay. Where do I start? Anywhere, Harry said. I've got time. So Sirius talked. He talked for 3 hours, and Harry sat across from him and listened with everything he had, and Dobby sat in the corner and occasionally added things, small true things from the edges of the story, the parts only a watcher would have seen, and Finn quietly left after the first hour and didn't come back, understanding correctly that this was not his hour. Sirius talked about James, who was reckless and generous and competitive and the most loyal person Sirius had ever known, and about Lily, who was sharper than people expected and funnier than people knew and who had argued with James for 2 years before admitting she liked him, and about a group of people who were young and brilliant and were given a war they hadn't asked for and tried to fight it without becoming what they were fighting, and about the ways they had failed at that and the ways they hadn't. He talked about Harry's parents falling in love and being frightened and being brave and making choices and being gone. He talked for 3 hours and his voice was rough and steady and Harry listened and did not ask him to stop, because every word was a memory he'd been denied and was now, finally, receiving, and it was the most important thing that had happened since the 33 Reroutes came out, and possibly the most important thing that had ever happened. At the end, when Sirius's voice had gone mostly to a rough quiet and the room was very late and the sanctuary was settled deep into night, Harry said, I'm glad you're here. Simple as that. No caveats. Sirius looked at him. Me too, kid, he said. Me too. He said kid like someone who had been waiting to use that word for 6 years and had not been sure they'd get to. Harry got up and went to bed. In the corridor, walking the 3 doors back to his own room, he stopped. Stood in the dark hallway of the sanctuary for a moment. Felt the old magic around him, the 800-year solidity of it, the certainty. He thought about Voldemort's cold searching attention at the southern border. He thought about what was coming. He thought about Sirius's laugh and about a leaf turning amber in the dark and about Elder Myra's silver eyes and Dobby on the window seat and the green gold light that was entirely his, entirely clean, entirely no one else's. Something settled in his chest that had never quite settled before. Not comfort, exactly. Not safety in any simple sense. More like, alignment. Like the feeling of a key in the right lock, the internal click of a thing that has found its correct position in the world. He went to bed. Down the hall, a light stayed on in Sirius's room for another 2 hours, because Sirius Black was sleeping in a real bed in a room that didn't get smaller, and he lay awake in it with 3 years of Azkaban on one side and the future on the other and his godson 3 doors down, and it took some time to let all of that become real. It became real. He slept. Chapter 5. The shape of a war. 3 weeks into his training, Harry set fire to a rainstorm. It wasn't intentional. Elder Mira had been working with him on scale, the difference between precise small magic, like the leaf, and broader reach, the kind that moved more of the world at once, and Harry had been trying to push the green-gold light outward into the rain that had been falling on the sanctuary all morning. The idea was to feel the weather, she'd said, not to control it, just to feel it as an extension of the magic in the air. What happened instead was that the rain, where Harry's magic touched it, ignited. Not in a destructive way. The water didn't stop being water. But for about 4 seconds every raindrop within 20 feet of Harry caught the green-gold light and burned with it, and the result was a sphere of warm luminous rain hanging in the air around him like something out of a story, each drop a tiny amber lantern, all of them falling at the same speed as before, just a light. Then his concentration broke and it went out and he was just standing in ordinary rain, soaking wet. Elder Mira stood 10 feet away under the shelter of the trees. She was looking at him with an expression that had moved past assessment into something more careful. "I wasn't trying to do that," Harry said. "I know," she said. Is that a problem?" She was quiet for a moment. "The problem," she said, "is not what you can do. The problem is the gap between what you can do and what you can control. The greater the power, the more critical the control." She paused. "You are 6 years old and you just illuminated a rainstorm. By the time you are 17, she stopped, seemed to decide against finishing that particular sentence. "Control," she said. "Every session from now on. Nothing else until control matches reach." Harry nodded. He was still looking at where the rain had been burning. He'd felt it, the moment his magic touched the water and the water just accepted it, no resistance, no negotiation, just a thing finding its natural complement. It had felt easy in a way that was almost alarming. "Elder Mira," he said. "Yes. When Voldemort was a student at Hogwarts, before he became what he became, how much control did he have at 16? 17? She looked at him for a long moment. "Considerable. He was, by most accounts, the most naturally powerful student Hogwarts had seen in several generations." A pause. "Why?" "Because he's been after me since I was 15 months old," Harry said. "And he's been building himself back up while I was locked down. I need to know what I'm working toward." "You are not working toward matching Voldemort," she said. "I know. I'm working toward being better." He met her gaze. Different timeline. Elder Mira studied him. The silver eyes did their precise measurement, found what they were looking for. "Control first," she said finally. "We do not rush power. We educate it." "Yes," Harry said. "But we don't slow-walk it either." A pause. "No," she agreed. "We do not." The news came on a Tuesday, carried through the elf network in the tight urgent way that meant it had been compressed for speed rather than clarity. Archivist Van brought it to the training ground at midday, arriving at a pace that was not quite running but was emphatically not his usual measured walk. He found Harry and Elder Mira and Dobby in the clearing where they'd been working since morning, and Harry looked up at his expression and was already still. "What?" Harry said. "Quirinus Quirrell," Van said. He pulled up his tablet. "Defense against the Dark Arts professor at Hogwarts. He left Britain 5 months ago on what was reported as a sabbatical. We have just received information from our Balkan network that suggests his sabbatical included an encounter with Voldemort's current form." "He's the vessel," Harry said. The cold thread at the southern border, 3 weeks ago, the night after Sirius's hearing, snapped back into his memory with sudden clarity. He'd known something was coming. He'd felt it. Voldemort's riding him. "We believe so, yes," Van said. "The magical signature our monitoring network picked up on Quirrell when he re-entered Britain yesterday is consistent with a dual presence, his own magic and something layered underneath it, something dark and very hungry. Sirius had come out of the trees at the edge of the clearing at some point during this. He stood with his arms folded and his face arranged in the expression Harry was coming to recognize as his pre-combat face, not angry, just attentive in a way that gathered all his scattered energy into a point. "He's heading for Hogwarts," Sirius said. It wasn't a question. That would be the logical destination, Finn confirmed. "There is something at Hogwarts that Voldemort wants. We are not certain what, but Dumbledore has apparently installed additional protections in the school over the past several months that suggest he was anticipating this." "The Philosopher's Stone," Sirius said. Everyone looked at him. He shrugged. "I was a spy and a soldier for 3 years before Azkaban. Flamel was always considered a target, immortality research, the stone specifically. If Voldemort's trying to get a body back, that's his fastest route." He paused. "And Dumbledore would hide it at Hogwarts because he thinks it's the best protected building in Britain. Is it?" Harry asked. "A beat. It was," Finn said carefully, "before the council demonstrated that our magic supersedes most of the protective architecture Hogwarts uses." "So Dumbledore is guarding something Voldemort wants," Harry said, "in a building he thinks is impenetrable, using a professor whose body Voldemort is currently occupying." He paused. "And Dumbledore doesn't know about Quirrell yet." "Dumbledore needs to know," Sirius said. "Dumbledore knows some things we don't want him knowing first," Harry said. He thought fast. "If we tell Dumbledore, he'll want to handle it himself and he'll want to keep Harry out of it." He caught himself, third person ing involuntarily, "keep me out of it. And if Quirrell is carrying Voldemort, Voldemort already knows I'm here and that the soul anchor is gone. He knows something changed fundamentally with me." He met Elder Myra's gaze. "He's going to come looking eventually. Better to be ready when he does than to let Dumbledore build more walls I don't know about." "You're suggesting we go to Hogwarts," Sirius said. "I'm suggesting we stop being reactive," Harry said. "Voldemort sent something to look at our border 3 weeks ago. He knows where I am. Waiting here for him to figure out a play isn't better than being where he's already going." "You want to draw him out," Sirius said slowly. "I want to meet him on ground I choose instead of ground he chooses." He looked around the clearing. "What does the council know about the stone's exact location?" "Third floor corridor," Finn said, with the air of someone who had already looked this up. "Behind a door with a specific magical lock. And several additional protections Dumbledore has installed. We have intelligence on most of them." "We tell Dumbledore about Quirrell," Elder Myra said. Her voice had the quality of someone making a decision rather than participating in one. Everyone looked at her. "We do not operate covertly around Dumbledore on matters of this magnitude. We have required him to be honest with us. We must hold ourselves to the same standard." She looked at Harry. "But we also do not ask his permission. We inform him of our findings and our intentions and we proceed." Harry nodded. "That's right. And what are our intentions?" Sirius asked. "We go to Hogwarts," Harry said. "We remove Quirrell from Hogwarts and we remove Voldemort from Quirrell. Before he gets to the stone." Sirius looked at him for a long moment with his arms still folded and his pre-combat face fully engaged. "You," Sirius said, "are 6 years old." "You keep saying that like it changes anything," Harry said. "It keeps failing to," Sirius agreed. He unfolded his arms. "Right. When do we go?" Dumbledore came to the sanctuary that afternoon. Harry had sent for him through the border monitors, a message that said simply, "Quirrell is Voldemort's vessel. We are going to Hogwarts tomorrow. You should know." No question at the end. No request for permission. A statement of facts and intentions delivered with the same flat courtesy that Elder Myra used when informing the Ministry of things it had not chosen. He arrived looking more rested than Harry had seen him, whatever the 2 weeks since the hearing had done, some of it seemed to have been sleep. But when Harry laid out what Fun had found, the rest came back, the tiredness of a very old man carrying a very long war. "Quirrell," Dumbledore said. He was sitting across from Harry in the meeting hall, Elder Myra to Harry's right, Sirius standing near the window. "I had concerns about him when he returned from his sabbatical. He was changed. I was monitoring. Not closely enough, Sirius said. Not cruelly, just precisely. No, Dumbledore said. He accepted it the way he'd been accepting things since the hearing, without the armor of justification. Not closely enough. The stone needs to move, Harry said. Moving it may alert Voldemort that we know about Quirrell, Dumbledore said. He already knows something is wrong, Harry said. He sent a probe to our border 3 weeks ago. He knows the anchor is gone. He knows I'm not where I was supposed to be. He's already operating on incomplete information and he's still making a move toward Hogwarts. He paused. Moving the stone doesn't make it worse. It takes the target away from a building full of children. Dumbledore was quiet. The children, Harry said. It was the angle he'd been sure of since the conversation started. There are students at Hogwarts. If Quirrell is carrying Voldemort and he's inside the school, every student in that building is at risk if things go badly. So we do this outside school hours, or we do it now before term starts. He looked at Dumbledore. When does term start? 2 months, Dumbledore said quietly. Then we go now. Dumbledore looked at him. He looked at Elder Mira. He looked at Sirius, who looked back with the expression of a man who has recently had 3 years of cage and is not interested in being cautious about a dark wizard. You intend to confront Quirrell directly, Dumbledore said. I intend to remove Voldemort's presence from Britain, Harry said. Quirrell is how we do it. He's the only physical form Voldemort currently has. He paused. What happens to Quirrell if we remove Voldemort from him? Dumbledore's eyes were very heavy. Voldemort's possession is not gentle. The damage to Quirrell's body has been accumulating for months. Removal of the possessing presence, if done forcibly, would likely kill him, Sirius said flatly. Yes. The room was quiet. Quirrell chose this, Sirius said. He went looking for Voldemort. He offered himself. Yes, Dumbledore said. He did. Then the weight of that is on him, Sirius said. Not on whoever removes Voldemort. Harry didn't say anything. He thought about Quirrell, a professor, a person, someone who had made a catastrophic choice that had led him here. He felt the weight of it without letting it become an argument against action. Some things were both tragic and necessary and the tragedy didn't make them less necessary. The elf-craft, Elder Mira said to Harry. What we discussed. Harry nodded. When we removed the soul anchor from me, you said elf magic doesn't negotiate with dark anchors. It withdraws recognition of their claim and they unravel. Yes. Voldemort is in Quirrell the way the Horcrux was in my scar, Harry said. Same principle. Different scale. Much larger scale, Elder Mira said carefully. This is not a fragment. This is what remains of a complete soul, however fractured. It is more powerful. It will resist differently. But the principle is the same. The principle is the same. Then I can do it, Harry said. He said it not with bravado but with the flat certainty of someone who has done the calculation and found the answer and is now stating it. With you there. With the council's backing. Dumbledore was looking at him with that expression again, the wondering one, the one that appeared every time Harry did something that fell outside the parameters of the model Dumbledore had built for him. Harry, Dumbledore said. I need to tell you something about the prophecy. I know about the prophecy, Harry said. You know of it, Dumbledore said. I want to tell you the full text. A pause. Go ahead, Harry said. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. The words fell into the room and settled. The power he knows not, Harry said. Yes. What do you think it is? Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. I have believed for several years that it referred to love. The sacrificial magic your mother performed. The quality that has always been associated with your survival. He paused. I now find myself, reconsidering. Harry looked at him. He knows about sacrificial magic, Harry said. He studied it. He knows about love as a magical force. He doesn't know about elfcraft. He looked at Elder Mira. He doesn't know about elfcraft as it applies to me. Elder Mira's silver eyes were very still. No, she said slowly. He does not. He knows human magic, Harry said. He has mastered human magic. He has lived inside human magical paradigms his entire life. Everything he's done, every protection he's built, every way he's structured his survival, it's all built on human magical principles. The Horcruxes are human magic. Possession is human magic. The killing curse is human magic. He paused. He doesn't know what I am now. Sirius was looking at him from the window with an expression that was partly alarmed and partly blazing with something that looked like pride. The power he knows not, Harry said again. It's not love. It's what Dobby found when he ran the wellness scan. It's what the Reroutes were hiding. It's elfcraft in a human magical core, something that has never existed before, because it's only possible if an elf has been watching over a child since birth and their magic has been in proximity for years. He looked at Dobby. Dobby was watching me for 5 years. Every time he checked the wellness scan, every time he used elf magic near me, that proximity leaves a trace, doesn't it? Dobby was very still. Yes, he said, quietly. It does. Dobby thought it was just a byproduct. Dobby didn't realize, it changed something in my core, Harry said. Elder Mira said it when she removed the anchor. She said elf magic operates on different principles than human magic. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't recognize claims it hasn't accepted. He looked at his hands, where the green-gold light waited, patient and immediate. Voldemort's magic, all dark magic, operates by claiming things. By imposing. By forcing the world to accept a hierarchy of power. He looked up. What happens when that kind of magic meets something that simply doesn't recognize its authority? The silence in the room had a quality to it, the specific quality of people who are watching something true become visible. It slides off, Elder Mira said. It slides off, Harry agreed. They went to Hogwarts the next morning. Harry. Sirius. Elder Mira. Dobby. Theron, the council's senior legal advocate, who turned out in practical situations to be considerably less advocate and considerably more combat specialist than his professional demeanor suggested. And 2 other council elves whose names Harry was still learning, Sable, who was quick and very quiet, and Ash, who was older than Elder Mira and communicated largely through gestures that everyone else seemed to understand without explanation. Dumbledore met them at the gates. Hogwarts in August was quiet in the way old buildings are quiet when they're resting, not empty, just attended to differently, the portraits awake but the corridors still, the magic of the castle present and ambient and unhurried. It felt, to Harry, somewhat like the sanctuary, old and certain of itself, but less sovereign. More institutional. A place that had decided what it was and maintained that decision through repetition rather than nature. He felt Quirrell before he saw him. They were moving through the 4th floor, heading toward the 3rd, Dumbledore in front, Harry and Elder Mira just behind, Sirius flanking with his wand out, when Harry stopped walking. He's above us, Harry said. Dumbledore stopped. The 3rd floor is, no. 5th floor. He's moved. Harry turned his head slowly. The cold thread was here, in the building, much closer than the border probe had been, a dark frequency humming through Hogwarts stones and carrying the double signature of it, Quirrell's warm anxious human magic and underneath it the hungry layered darkness of something that was not Quirrell at all. He knows we're here. He's using the castle's wards to track us, Elder Mira said. Then we move fast, Sirius said. They moved fast. The fifth-floor corridor was empty when they reached it, but it had not been empty long. Harry could feel the magical residue of a presence that had been here and moved, could feel the thread of it moving through the building, and he stopped thinking about following it and started thinking about where it was going instead. "He's going down," Harry said. "He's going around us. He's heading for the third floor anyway." "Through the..." Dumbledore started. "The hidden staircase on the west side," Harry said, because he could feel the thread moving through the castle's bones, and the castle itself was old enough and had enough magic of its own to carry that information if you knew how to listen. "He knows we're between him and the direct route, so he's going around." Sirius was already moving. "I'll cut the west staircase." "Sirius, I'll be fine," Sirius said, and he ran, robes flying, and in that moment he looked absolutely nothing like a man who had spent 3 years in Azkaban and absolutely everything like the young soldier who had fought a war at 20. "The rest of us go direct," Harry said. They went direct. The third-floor corridor was famous among Hogwarts students for being forbidden, and Harry understood why when they pushed through the door. Dumbledore's protections were layered here like walls, each one distinct, each one serious. He could feel them stacked in front of him like locked doors. He felt Elder Mira beside him read the same architecture and make the same assessment. "I can go through them," Harry said. "Faster than going around." "Show me," Elder Mira said. Harry held his hands out and found the first protection, a binding ward, designed to root anyone in place who broke the door lock. He reached his magic into it. Not against it, that would be resistance, human magic's response, force meeting force. He did what he'd been practicing with the rain. He extended the green gold light outward and simply, didn't acknowledge the ward's claim. Reached through it like it was fog rather than wall. The ward fluttered. Tried to grip. Found nothing to grip. They walked through it. The next 4 went the same way, each one a different mechanism, each one designed to stop someone operating on human magical principles, each one encountering something that didn't operate on human magical principles and finding nothing to push against. The corridor beyond was lit with floating torches and smelled like old stone and something faintly acrid, and at the far end of it was a door, and in front of that door, standing very still with his back to them, was Quirinus Quirrell. He turned around. Harry's first impression was that the man looked unwell in a way that went beyond illness. There was a translucency to him, something about the way the torchlight moved through his skin that suggested his body was losing its argument with what was living inside it. His eyes were too bright. His hands, at his sides, were shaking in a way that seemed separate from the rest of him, a separate entity's agitation expressing through borrowed limbs. "Harry Potter," Quirrell said. His voice had a harmonic underneath it that was not his voice. "Professor," Harry said. "You have come a long way from your cupboard." The harmonic deepened, pulling the voice somewhere else. "He kept you very small. I felt it go, you know. The anchor. Like losing a tooth." The not Quirrell underneath the words was more present now, more surface. "I wondered what you would become without it." "Now you know," Harry said. "Do I?" Something in Quirrell's face shifted, the skin moving wrong, the eyes tracking independently for a half-second before Voldemort's control reasserted. "I know you have learned elf tricks from old creatures who have been hiding in forests while the real wars were fought. I know you have a godfather freed from prison who is very angry on your behalf. I know Dumbledore is behind you trying to decide if this is the plan he made or the plan that replaced his plan." The harmonic was fully dominant now, Quirrell receding, and the voice was cold and curious and not afraid. "What I do not know is whether you are actually a threat or whether you are a boy who had his chains removed and has mistaken freedom for power." Harry looked at him. "Come find out," Harry said. What Voldemort sent through Quirrell was fast and dark and very serious, a curse that would have flayed the magic from a human practitioner like bark from a branch. Harry felt it coming the way he'd felt the ward mechanisms, a pattern, a structure, a claim being imposed on the world. He didn't move. He didn't raise a shield. He reached the green gold light outward and simply withdrew recognition of the curse's claim, and the curse hit that end, came apart. Not deflected. Not blocked. Came apart, its structural integrity dissolving because the thing it was trying to impose itself on had declined to acknowledge its authority, and dark magic without a claim on its target is just energy with no direction, and energy with no direction disperses. The corridor was very still. Voldemort, through Quirrell, was very still. "What?" the doubled voice said slowly, "are you?" "Something you've never met," Harry said. "Something that doesn't work the way you think it does." What came next was not one curse. It was everything, Voldemort throwing everything he had through Quirrell's failing body, a torrent of dark magic that had decades of expertise and genuine power behind it, and it came at Harry like a breaking wave. Harry breathed. He felt Elder Myra's magic join his from the left, her silver certainty, ancient and impartial, adding its weight to his. He felt Dobby's amber warmth from behind, the 5-year proximity of it woven into the edges of his core, familiar as his own heartbeat. He felt the sanctuary's magic in him like ballast, the 800-year solidity of a place that simply was and could not be argued otherwise. He reached outward with everything he had and he withdrew recognition from all of it. The torrent hit the green gold light. And stopped. The stopping was not quiet. It was a sound like a very large piece of silence, the negative of a noise, the absence of impact where impact had been certain, and in that absence something happened to Voldemort's hold on Quirrell that was visible even from across the corridor. Quirrell dropped to one knee. His hands pressed against the stone floor and the double harmonic in his voice tore apart, two things that had been coexisting in one body suddenly and violently separated. Voldemort's presence rose, Harry could see it, almost, in the way the cold thread at his teeth became visible, a dark shimmer of something trying to be in the world without a physical form. "Now," Elder Myra said. Harry extended both hands. The green gold light went out from him like a wave, and Elder Myra's silver joined it, and what it carried was the fundamental principle of elfcraft, not an attack, not a destruction, but a withdrawal of recognition. A sovereign declaration that this thing's claim was not acknowledged. That it had no purchase here, no authority, no valid occupation of anything it was trying to hold. Voldemort's presence, without purchase, without authority, without a host and without an anchor, did what the Horcrux had done. It unraveled. Slowly, and then quickly, and then completely, and it made no sound, and it left nothing behind. Quirrell collapsed. Sirius arrived from the west staircase doorway 30 seconds later, breathing hard, wand out, and looked at Harry standing in the corridor with his hands still glowing, and Dobby pressed against Harry's side, and Elder Myra composed and silver-eyed, and Quirrell on the ground, and said, "Did I miss it?" "Yes," Harry said. "Merlin's," Sirius pressed a hand over his face. "I was 30 seconds, we didn't need the west staircase," Harry said. "He came straight to us." "He came straight," Sirius looked at Quirrell. "Is he alive?" Dobby said. He had crossed to Quirrell and was crouched beside him, one hand pressed to the man's forehead with the amber wellness glow. "Badly damaged. He will need significant magical medical care and he may not," he paused. "He chose this. But he is alive for now." Dumbledore had come into the corridor behind Harry. He was very quiet. He stood and looked at the space where Voldemort's presence had been, the quality of the air, the way the torches had stopped flickering and now burned straight and steady, and something moved through his face that Harry didn't entirely try to read. "It's done," Harry said. "He's gone. Whatever fragments of soul he had left, the remaining Horcruxes will need to be found and destroyed, but the active presence, the consciousness, that's gone." "How can you be sure?" Dumbledore asked quietly. "Because nothing of him is here," Harry said. "Not even a residue. The elfcraft didn't destroy him the way a curse would, it withdrew recognition of his claim on the world. He didn't have enough of himself left to exist without something recognizing him." He paused. "He existed because he'd imposed himself on enough things, the Horcruxes, Quirrell, the anchor in my scar, that the world had accepted his presence as a given. The elfcraft removed that acceptance." He looked at Dumbledore. "He needed to be recognized to be real. We stopped recognizing him." Dumbledore was quiet for a long time. "The power he knows not," he said finally. "Yes. You knew," Dumbledore said. "Yesterday, in the meeting hall. You had already worked it out." "I had a theory," Harry said. "It was right." Dumbledore looked at him. The old face held a dozen things at once, and Harry let him hold them, didn't try to manage the expression or offer anything for it to organize around. Whatever Dumbledore felt about what Harry had just done, about what Harry was, that was Dumbledore's business. "There are still Horcruxes," Harry said. "We know he made several. We'll need to find them." "Yes," Dumbledore said. "That's your work," Harry said. "You know more about his history than anyone. You find them. The Council will destroy them, same principle, same process. You research, the Council and I handle the destruction." He held Dumbledore's gaze. "That's the arrangement. You don't plan around me. You work with me." Dumbledore was quiet. "Yes," he said. The same plain word as before, in the same meeting hall voice. An agreement made by someone who understood its cost and was paying it. "Good," Harry said. The walk back through Hogwarts was quieter than the walk in. Harry walked beside Sirius, who had put his wand away and was moving with the loosened stride of someone who has been braced for impact and is now recalibrating to a world where the impact happened and was survived. He kept glancing down at Harry with the expression Harry was coming to read as still processing. "Can I ask you something?" Sirius said. "Yeah." "When you told him to come find out," he paused. That was deliberately provoking him. "Yeah. You wanted him to throw everything at you." "I needed to know the full extent of what he had left," Harry said. "And I needed Elder Mira to see it so she could calibrate. If we'd maneuvered slowly, he might have found a way to retreat back into Quirrell and hide. Making him angry made him commit." He paused. "Dark wizards who've spent decades being the most powerful thing in the room don't respond well to someone not being afraid of them. It makes them hasty." Sirius looked at him for a long moment. "Where did you learn that?" "Dobby told me about the Malfoys," Harry said. "Same principle, smaller scale." From behind them, Dobby made a sound that might have been pride. They emerged from the castle into the August morning, bright, ordinary, Hogwarts grounds green and still and entirely ignorant of what had just happened 3 floors inside them. The lake lay flat and silver. The trees at the edge of the forest moved in the light wind. Sirius tilted his face toward the sun. Just for a moment. Just stood there in the morning and felt it. Harry looked at him. He didn't say anything. He just stood beside him and let it be the thing it was. 2 people standing in sunlight after something that had needed doing was done, and that was sufficient, and nothing else needed to be added to it. "The Horcruxes," Sirius said eventually, eyes still closed. "Dumbledore's project," Harry said. "We check in but we don't chase it. He needs something to do. He needs to be useful," Sirius said. He understood that, Harry thought. The way Azkaban had taught him what uselessness felt like. "Yeah." Harry paused. "We go back to the sanctuary. I finish the training. We watch the Horcrux work from a distance and help when we're needed." He thought. "And in a couple of years when Hogwarts becomes relevant, you're going to Hogwarts," Sirius said. "Of course I'm going to Hogwarts. On your terms." "On my terms." Sirius finally opened his eyes. He looked down at Harry with the expression that had been building since the meeting hall yesterday, the one that was about James and Lily and 3 years in Azkaban and a 6-year-old who had just unraveled a dark wizard's consciousness using magic that the dark wizard hadn't known existed. "Your mum," Sirius said. "She would have had so much to say about today. She would have been absolutely brilliant and slightly terrifying, and she would have gone to about 40 different experts to verify every part of what you told Dumbledore, and she would have come back having found a flaw in one small detail, and she would have been very pleased about that." Harry laughed. The good laugh, the one that surprised him. And your dad, Sirius said, would have challenged Voldemort to a foot race. Would he have won? Absolutely not, Sirius said. But he would have tried. They walked together across the Hogwarts grounds toward where the council elves were waiting at the gate, and the sun was warm and the morning was very ordinary, and somewhere in the castle behind them a man named Quirinus Quirrell was being transported to St. Mungo's and would spend several months there and would eventually recover in the incomplete way that people recover from things they chose and regretted, and the stone in the third-floor corridor had never been touched, and Voldemort, what had been Voldemort, what remained of him, the shredded last persistence of a soul that had mutilated itself into near nothing, was gone. Not dormant. Not waiting. Gone. The Horcruxes remained. Harry knew that. Several objects in the world still carried fragments of what Voldemort had been, and those would need finding and destroying, and that was real work and it would take time, and Dumbledore would do what Dumbledore was actually good at, which was research and history and the patient accumulation of knowledge, now directed by someone who could hold him accountable to it. But the active presence was gone. The thing that had been reaching through the world, accumulating power, building toward return, that was finished. Not by a war. Not by a prophecy fulfilled in blood. By a 6-year-old boy who had been told for 6 years that the correct response to danger was to survive it quietly and who had finally, in the last several weeks, learned what he actually was. Harry walked through the gate. The council elves fell in around them. Dobby walked at his side with his chin up and his enormous eyes bright and forward-facing, and he said nothing, because nothing needed saying, and they left Hogwarts in the morning sun and did not look back. Chapter 6, Sovereignty. The tribunal was Archivist Finn's idea. He brought it to Elder Mira 2 days after Hogwarts, standing in the doorway of her office with his stone tablet and his amber eyes bright with the particular energy that meant he had been thinking about something at length and had arrived somewhere he found genuinely exciting. Elder Mira listened to his proposal for 4 minutes without interrupting, which Harry had come to understand was the elf equivalent of enthusiastic agreement. A public tribunal, she said, when he finished. The first in 300 years. The last one was 1723, Finn said. The Goblin banking sovereignty case. The outcome restructured the entire relationship between Gringotts and the Ministry. He paused. I believe this one would do something similar. Who gets named? Elder Mira asked. Everyone, Finn said. All 33 violation sources. Every individual, every institution. The Ministry Compulsion Program. Dumbledore's Reroutes. The incidental compulsions. All of it, publicly, on the record, with full documentation. He set the tablet on her desk. The right of magical claim gives us standing to demand this. The evidence is already compiled. The legal framework exists. We have never done it because we have not previously had a case that warranted it. He looked at her. We have that case now. Harry found out at dinner. Finn laid it out over the meal with the methodical pleasure of someone who has built something structurally elegant and wants to walk you through the load-bearing elements, and Harry sat across from him and listened and then said, What does it mean for the people named? The tribunal is not a criminal proceeding, Finn said. It cannot imprison. It cannot execute. What it can do is enter a formal finding of violation into the sovereign record, strip any magical contracts or authorities derived from those violations, and require restitution. He paused. And make everything public. Every detail, every name, every action. In a forum that the Ministry cannot control and the Daily Prophet cannot misquote because the record is elf-kept. Dumbledore, Sirius said. He was eating with the specific concentration of someone who was still rebuilding the habit of eating properly. He'll be named. Yes, Harry said. Does he know? I'll tell him, Harry said. He won't fight it. He picked up his cup. He told me he owed me truth. This is the truth in its largest form. His name on a public record saying what he did. He'll hate it and he'll accept it. He paused. That's actually harder than prison, for someone like him. Prison is just walls. A public record is his own story, told by someone else, and he can't edit it. Sirius looked at him for a moment. "You're not wrong," he said. "But you're also 6. If you say that one more time," Harry said pleasantly, "I'm going to illuminate your breakfast." Dobby made a sound that was not technically a laugh. Sirius grinned. It was the best version of his grin yet, less effortful, more natural, starting to resemble the person he'd been before Azkaban rather than the person trying to remember who that had been. "Fair point," he said. "When's the tribunal?" 2 weeks, Finn said. "That gives us time to notify all named parties, prepare the documentation, and arrange the venue." He looked at Elder Mira. "The sanctuary's exterior grounds. Open sky, open invitation. Anyone in the magical world who wishes to attend may attend." "Anyone," Harry said. "Anyone," Finn confirmed. Harry thought about that. About the wizarding world, which he had not yet fully entered, which knew him only as a name and a scar and a story they'd been telling themselves for 6 years, coming here, to the sanctuary's edge, to watch the truth be read into the sovereign record. "Good," he said. He told Dumbledore on a Thursday. The old wizard had taken to visiting the sanctuary every few days since Hogwarts, not long visits, not presumptuous ones, always announced, always at the border first. He and Harry talked for an hour or 2 at a time, and the talks had a quality Harry was learning to appreciate. Dumbledore, deprived of his narrative advantage and his ability to manage information, was actually an extraordinary conversationalist. He knew things. He knew the history of the magical world in the way very old people who have been paying attention know things, not just facts but texture, the way events felt when they were happening, the way decisions looked from inside the moment rather than in retrospect. He was also, Harry was slowly discovering, genuinely funny. Not in the performative eccentric way, not the twinkling eyes deflection. When he dropped the armor there was a dry wit underneath it that surfaced in unexpected moments, and it was very good, and Harry suspected James Potter had appreciated it and that this was part of why Dumbledore's grief over James was complicated and large. They were sitting in the Welcome Grove, a small open space at the sanctuary's eastern edge where the border was softer, where visitors who came with good intent were made comfortable, when Harry said, without preamble, "There's going to be a tribunal. In 2 weeks. Public. Every violation named." Dumbledore's teacup stopped halfway to his mouth. "You'll be named," Harry said. "All 7 reroutes. The memory suppression. The placement at Privet Drive. Everything the council documented. It goes into the sovereign record and it's public and it stays there permanently." Dumbledore set the teacup down. Harry watched him. He was watching for the armor to go up, the management, the reframing, the gentle redirection toward larger context. He watched for it and it didn't come. What came instead was just a man sitting with something heavy and being too tired to perform around it. "I see," Dumbledore said. "You won't fight it." "No," Dumbledore said. "I won't." He looked out at the sanctuary's border, where the quality of air shifted. "It is the correct thing to do." "I know you know that," Harry said. "I'm telling you so you're not surprised on the day. And because," he paused. He had thought about this part. "Because I want you to come. Not as a defendant, not waiting somewhere to hear the outcome. Present. In the space. When your name is read and the violations are read." Dumbledore looked at him. "You want me to witness it," he said. "I want you to be witness doing it," Harry said. "There's a difference. Staying away is easy. Coming, standing in front of everyone who knows your name, and not defending yourself, that's the thing that actually costs you something." He held Dumbledore's gaze. "And I think you know it needs to cost you something real." The silence stretched. A bird called somewhere in the sanctuary trees. The border's ambient magic hummed its low steady frequency. "Yes," Dumbledore said. "I know that." "All right," Harry said. "Then I'll see you in 2 weeks." He got up. He was almost to the path back into the sanctuary when Dumbledore said his name. Harry turned around. "Your mother," Dumbledore said. He was still looking at the border, not at Harry. "She came to me before she went to the council. She asked me, she expressed her concerns about what I was planning, about you and the prophecy and the role I had designed for you. She was very clear about her objections." He paused. "I told her the greater good required it. I used those words. Greater good." He was quiet for a moment. "I have been thinking about what she would say if she were here today. Watching this." Harry waited. "I think she would be extremely eloquent," Dumbledore said. "And I think I would deserve every word." Harry looked at him. He thought about the red-haired woman in his dream, and the flower, and the joy on her face that was specifically the joy of someone who was very used to being right and was also very kind about it. "Yeah," Harry said. "Probably." He paused. "She went to the council anyway. After you said no. She did what she thought was right even when someone very powerful told her it wasn't." He let that sit for a moment. "I get that from her, I think." He walked back into the sanctuary without waiting for a response. Behind him, Dumbledore sat in the welcome grove for a long time with his cold tea and his old thoughts, and the border hummed around him, and the morning was clear and unhurried, and he sat in it and let it be what it was. The 2 weeks were not quiet ones. The ministry sent 3 more delegations, each one more senior than the last. The 4th one included the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, a sharp-faced witch named Amelia Bones who arrived without Fudge's performance of warmth and asked direct questions and listened to the answers with the specific attention of someone who was assessing rather than managing. Harry met with her directly. Elder Mira sat in but said very little, which Harry understood was deliberate. She was letting the ministry see that Harry operated independently, that he wasn't being handled or managed, that the version of him they'd been anticipating bore no resemblance to the actual article. Amelia Bones asked about the quarrel situation first. Harry told her. She asked 3 clarifying questions and wrote things down and then said, "The threat is eliminated, in your assessment." "The active presence is eliminated," Harry said. "There are residual objects, Horcruxes, that we are working to locate and destroy. I wouldn't call it complete until those are gone." "How long?" "Months, maybe longer. Dumbledore is leading the research. We'll handle the destruction as each one is found." Amelia Bones wrote something down. "And your position is that the ministry should be kept informed." "My position is that the ministry should do its job, which is protecting magical Britain, which it cannot do effectively if it's operating on incomplete information," Harry said. "So yes, we'll keep you informed." In exchange, he looked at her, the ministry fully cooperates with the tribunal proceedings. Every document the council requests. Every witness required. No delays, no legal maneuvers, no pressure on named parties to minimize or recant. Amelia Bones looked at him for a moment. Then she said, with the flat professional respect of one competent person to another, "Agreed." She left without asking where Harry would live long-term, or when he planned to attend school, or whether the Elf Council had the legal right to act as his guardian, all the questions the previous delegations had tried to press. Harry appreciated that. She had decided those weren't her most important problems and had moved on. "She's going to be useful," Sirius said afterward. He'd been in the corner watching. Harry had stopped noticing that he did that, stationed himself at the edges of meetings, wand not out but hand near it, the protective arrangement of someone who had decided this was a thing he was doing now and was completely matter-of-fact about it. "She did her job," Harry said. "That's all I'm looking for." "That's a low bar," Sirius said. "You'd be surprised," Elder Mira said drily, from across the room. The night before the tribunal, Harry couldn't sleep. He lay in the familiar dark of his sanctuary room and listened to Dobby's even breathing from the window seat and felt his magic moving through him, the green-gold steady pulse of it, and thought about what tomorrow meant. It wasn't fear. He examined that carefully, the way Elder Mira had taught him to examine his own states without immediately trying to manage them, just feel the thing, know its shape, understand what it is before deciding what to do with it. It was not fear. It was something more like anticipation crossed with weight. The feeling of standing at the start of something that cannot be undone once begun, which was different from the feeling of facing danger because danger ends and this wouldn't end, this would just become the new ground everything else stood on. He got up. He walked barefoot through the sanctuary's corridors, which were lit by the faint ambient glow of the elf lights rather than the sharp efficiency of human lighting. They made long warm pools between shadows, and Harry walked through them, and the sanctuary was quiet and breathing and very old and entirely comfortable with its own existence. He found himself outside Sirius's room. He stood in the corridor for a moment. Then he knocked. A pause. The sounds of someone going from sleep to awake. Then, Harry. Yeah. The door opened. Sirius was standing in his doorway in his sleepwear with his hair everywhere, looking better than he had on the day of the hearing, substantively better, visibly, the Azkaban damage still present but farther under the surface than it had been, buried by weeks of sleep and food and mornings in the sun and evenings talking. He took in Harry, barefoot, awake, 9 o'clock at night, and stepped back from the door. "Come in," he said. Harry came in and sat on the window seat. Sirius sat on the bed across from him and waited, which was the right thing to do. "I keep thinking about what happens after," Harry said. "After tomorrow?" "After all of it. After the tribunal, after the Horcruxes, after the thing is finished and there's no immediate emergency requiring attention." He paused. "My whole life, all 6 years of it, has been emergency management. Surviving the Dursleys, the 33 Reroutes, Voldemort's anchor, Quirrell. There's always been something pressing." He looked at his hands. "I don't know what I am when it's just, ordinary. When it's just a person living a life." Sirius was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "I know that feeling. From Azkaban. From before Azkaban too, actually. The war was all I knew from 16 onward. Fighting, hiding, losing people, fighting more. When it ended," he stopped. "When it ended I didn't know what to do with a Tuesday that wasn't about survival. And then Azkaban, which was its own kind of survival, and now this." He looked at Harry. "I think about that too. What a Tuesday looks like." Harry looked at him. "What do you want a Tuesday to look like?" Sirius thought about it for a genuine moment, not deflecting. "Breakfast," he said. "Long breakfast, nowhere to be. You being annoying about something you've read. Maybe a garden. I used to like the garden at Grimmauld Place before it became what it became. Teaching you to fly." He paused. He made a gesture that encompassed the room, the sanctuary, the people in it, this. But slower. Without the tribunal and the ministry and the dark wizard. Just the people. Harry was quiet. "That's what I want too," he said. "I just don't know how to imagine it without the emergency in the middle of it. Like I don't have a template for it." "Then we make the template," Sirius said. "As we go. It doesn't have to look like what someone else's ordinary life looks like." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You're 6. You are, genuinely, I cannot stress this enough, 6. Whatever ordinary looks like for you, it should include being 6. Not just in the chronological sense." Harry considered this. "What does being 6 involve?" "Flying," Sirius said immediately. "Definitely flying. Terrible decisions about what to eat. Staying up too late reading things you're not supposed to be reading yet because you find them interesting and nobody can technically stop you." He paused. "Learning things because you want to learn them, not because they're strategically useful." "Like what?" "I don't know. Astronomy. Potions. How to play exploding snap." He tilted his head. "What do you want to learn that has nothing to do with fighting dark wizards?" Harry thought about it. He thought about the sanctuary's garden, and the old elf coaxing luminous plants from dark soil, and the way the plants had moved in response to attention. He thought about the forest with the trees too tall to see the top of, and the lights hanging between the branches. He thought about Sirius's laugh and Dobby's pink-tipped ears and Elder Myra's rare sudden smile. Everything, Harry said. I want to learn everything. Just, not all at once, and not for a reason. Sirius smiled at him. The full version. That, he said, is the most 6-year-old thing you've ever said. Harry laughed. They sat together in Sirius's room for another hour, not talking about the tribunal, not talking about Horcruxes or the Ministry or Dumbledore or what came next. Sirius talked about the Marauders, the stupid small stories, the ones that weren't about the war, the ones that were about 4 boys being ridiculous in the specific ridiculous way of people who loved each other and were never serious enough about the right things and were always serious about the wrong ones. Harry listened and laughed and asked questions, and the hour passed warmly and without urgency. When he went back to his room, the feeling in his chest was different. Still the anticipation weight, still the awareness of tomorrow's magnitude. But underneath it, quieter and more fundamental, something that had been missing from the calculations, the actual present. Not the emergency, not the strategy, not what needed doing. Just the room, and the warmth of the hour just past, and Dobby on the window seat, and his magic moving through him like a heartbeat. He went to sleep. He dreamed of the woman with the red hair, and this time she turned to look at him, and her face was exactly what Sirius had described, bright and precise and kind, and she was holding a flower that glowed in her hands, amber and green gold mixed together, and she was smiling at him with an expression that was not a dream expression, that felt inhabited and true. He couldn't hear what she said. But he could read her lips. There you are. He woke with the words in his chest and kept them there, folded carefully, and got up. The morning of the tribunal was clear. The kind of clear that August produces when it remembers what it's supposed to be, the sky a deep uncomplicated blue, the light direct and warm, the sanctuary's forest breathing its slow arboreal breath. By 8 in the morning elves were preparing the exterior grounds in the organized purposeful way they did everything, and by 9 the grounds were transformed. Not decorated. The elves didn't go in for decoration in the human sense, they didn't add things, they clarified what was already there. The old trees arranged their own light. The grass was simply more itself. A wide natural amphitheater that Harry had not previously noticed was suddenly clearly visible in the landscape, a gentle bowl in the earth fronted by the largest of the old trees, whose roots provided natural seating and whose canopy spread a dappled roof overhead. At the center, a flat stone. Old, clearly old, with markings on it that were not writing in any human alphabet but were evidently significant because every elf who passed it moved slightly differently, a fractional shift in bearing, the way you walk differently in a space you recognize as important. The speaking stone, Fun said, when Harry asked. He was dressed more formally than Harry had seen him, robes a deep copper to match his eyes, his stone tablet polished, his manner carrying the weight of the occasion without being burdened by it. When a statement is made at the speaking stone during a formal tribunal, it enters the sovereign record permanently. It cannot be altered, retracted, or expunged. He paused. This is why we do not use it lightly. Have you ever seen one? Harry asked. A tribunal. I was not alive for the last one, Fun said. No living elf was. But I have read every record of every tribunal in our history. He looked at the stone. I know what they do. What do they do? Fun was quiet for a moment. They change what is true in the world's memory, he said. Not what happened, that cannot be changed. But whether it is known. Whether it is acknowledged. Whether the world is required to carry it. He looked at Harry. Most injustices persist because they are never fully named. They are referenced, sometimes, or hinted at, or dealt with in the dark in quiet ways that leave no record. A tribunal names them. In public, with witnesses, under a sovereignty that cannot be pressured or bought. He paused. After a tribunal, the thing exists differently. The world knows it differently. Harry thought about 33 lights on a stone tablet. He thought about a 15-month-old baby and a compulsion for docility and a cupboard under the stairs. Good, he said. They came from everywhere. Harry stood at the edge of the sanctuary's welcome grove and watched them come, witches and wizards arriving by portkey at the designated point beyond the sanctuary's border and walking in through the opened wards, escorted by council elves, spreading out across the amphitheater grounds in a specific uncertain manner of people arriving somewhere they haven't been before and finding it more significant than expected. He recognized some of them. Amelia Bones arrived early, with 2 of her department heads, and went straight to a spot with clear sightlines and didn't move. The Daily Prophet had sent not Rita Skeeter but Barnabas Cuff himself, who had a quick quotes quill that he was keeping firmly capped, because Fun had informed all press that the sovereign record was the record and anything that misrepresented it would receive a formal correction from the council that would be considerably more embarrassing than accurate reporting. Members of the Wisingamot arrived in clusters. Parents arrived, dozens of them, ordinary magical families who had read the Prophet articles about the compulsion programs and had come to watch their government named and held accountable in a forum it couldn't control. Griselda Marchbanks arrived with 2 other senior Wisingamot members and sat in the front with the composed authority of people who had already decided where they stood. Fudge came alone, without officials, without his lime green bowler hat. He looked smaller than he had in the ministry. He sat near the back and was very quiet and nobody paid him special attention, which Harry suspected was worse for him than if they had. Dumbledore arrived last, on foot, from the Welcome Grove path. He was dressed simply, no midnight robes, no magnificent hat, just plain grey that made him look older and more human than his usual presentation. He walked to the spot Elder Mira had designated for named parties, a section at the side of the amphitheater, open and visible, positioned so that during the proceedings they were present but not prominent, and he sat down and he folded his hands in his lap and he looked at the speaking stone and did not perform anything at all. Harry watched him do this from across the grounds. He felt nothing about it that was simple. He felt anger, clean and accurate, directed at specific actions rather than at the man doing them. He felt something adjacent to respect for the way Dumbledore was sitting in this moment. He felt the absence of the 33 reroutes the way you feel the absence of a weight that has been on you so long you stopped noticing it, not gratitude for its removal, which implied it had a right to be there, but the clean neutrality of having the correct amount of yourself. He felt, underneath everything, the green-gold hum of a magic that was entirely and only his. "Ready?" Sirius said, appearing beside him. "Yeah," Harry said. Sirius straightened his robes, new ones, properly fitted, deep charcoal gray. He had cut his hair the previous week, not short but less wild, and he looked more like himself. More like the person who had existed before. "You're going to stand at the stone," he said. "And they're going to ask you questions about what was done to you, and you're going to answer them, and the answers are going to go into the record, and then it's done." He paused. "That's all." "I know," Harry said. "I know you know," Sirius said. "I was saying it for me." Harry looked at him. "Are you nervous?" "Absolutely," Sirius said. "I'm going to be watching my 6-year-old godson address several hundred witches and wizards about the systematic violations committed against him while the people responsible sit in a designated section and take it." He paused. "I'm going to be so nervous. I'm going to stand right over there." He pointed to a spot with very clear sight lines and easy access to every named party in the designated section, "and I am going to be extremely calm looking on the outside." "That's all I ask," Harry said. Dobby appeared at his other side. Dressed not in a pillowcase but in a small formal robe, the deep amber of his magic, which Elder Mira had apparently arranged and which Dobby had received with the careful dignity of someone trying not to look overwhelmed by a kindness. His ears were straight and his eyes were very bright. "Dobby," Harry said. "You're coming to the stone with me." Dobby went very still. "The case begins with you," Harry said. "You ran the wellness scan. You found the reroutes. You called the council. Without you, none of this." He stopped. "Start it again." You should be there. When they read what you did. Dobby looked at him for a moment that was the full length of 5 years of watching and waiting and worrying and the particular terrible love of caring for someone you cannot reach. He pressed his lips together very carefully. Dobby will be there, he said. Elder Mira opened the tribunal with the economy of someone who understands that gravity does not need assistance. She stood at the speaking stone in her deep water robes, in front of several hundred people and the old trees and the clear August sky, and she said, "The Elf Council convenes this tribunal under the right of magical claim to address 33 verified violations of magical sovereignty committed against the person of Harry James Potter, born July 31, 1980. The sovereign record is open. All findings made today are permanent and irrevocable." She stepped back. Archivist Fan took her place and read the violations in sequence. Each one. Methodically, precisely, with date and source and nature and effect. His voice carried across the amphitheater with the clarity of someone who has been preparing this specific reading for weeks and understands its weight. The first 7. Dumbledore's Reroutes. The date each was placed. The effect of each one. The compulsion for docility, placed at 15 months old. The memory suppression, placed at 22 months. The loyalty redirects, the trust compulsions, the perception management. Read into the permanent record of the Elf Sovereign Archive, under open sky, witnessed by several hundred people who were entirely silent. Then the ministry violations. The perception filter. The tracking compulsion. The ministry authority bias, and the expanded information, the number of children affected, which Amelia Bones had provided with the compressed expression of someone delivering information that was going to cost her institution significantly, 234 children, placed between 1971 and 1991. A sound moved through the assembled crowd, not quite a gasp, more like a collective exhaling of something held. Then the incidental violations. The well-meaning and the careless and the self-interested. Each source named, each effect stated. Then the 8 reroutes carved by sustained treatment, not compulsions from wands but the accumulated weight of 5 years in a house that told a child what he could not be, and these Fan read quietly, and there was no correspondent source named because the source was a pattern rather than a person, and Harry felt several hundred people understand something in a new way and the amphitheater was completely silent. Then Fan stepped back and said, "Harry Potter will speak." Harry walked to the speaking stone. He was aware, as he walked across the grass, of the size of the assembled crowd. Of Dumbledore in the named parties section with his folded hands. Of Fudge at the back, smaller than usual. Of Amelia Bones with her clear sightlines. Of Barnabas Cuff with his capped quill. Of Sirius, in the spot he'd pointed to, holding himself very still with the internal vibration of someone being extremely calm looking on the outside. He stopped at the speaking stone. He stood on it, feet apart, and looked out at the crowd. He was 6 years old. He was 3'8". He was wearing clean robes in deep green that Sirius had chosen and that were, for the first time, cut to his actual measurements. He had a scar on his forehead that was only a scar. He had green eyes that were Lily's eyes and untidy black hair that was James's hair and magic in his hands that was green gold and entirely his own. He put his hands at his sides and he let the crowd look at him and he said, "My name is Harry Potter. I'm 6 years old. Most of you know my name from a story about something that happened when I was 15 months old, and that's the first thing I want to put in the record, I was 15 months old. I didn't defeat anyone. A piece of dark magic rebounded because of my mother's sacrifice, and the story that grew up around it turned me into a symbol before I was old enough to know what symbols were." His voice was clear and it carried and it did not shake. "I grew up at number 4, Privet Drive, with my aunt and uncle. I slept in the cupboard under the stairs. That is not a metaphor. It is a description of a physical cupboard with a door that locked from the outside." He paused, not for effect but because he was choosing the next words with care. "I didn't know anything was wrong with this, specifically, because I had 33 compulsions on my magic that told me the right response to difficulty was to be quiet and endure it. The biggest one of those was placed when I was 15 months old by Albus Dumbledore, who believed he was protecting me. He looked at Dumbledore. I want to be clear that I am not saying he is a bad person. I am saying that he made decisions about my life that were not his to make, that he made them without my knowledge, and that those decisions had consequences I am still discovering. That is in the record now. It cannot be changed. Dumbledore was looking at him steadily. His face was very still and completely open, the full weight of the moment landing on it without the protection of any armor. The Ministry placed compulsions in 234 children, Harry said. Including me. These were not mistakes. They were programs. They were sanctioned. They were designed to produce a particular kind of magical citizen, compliant, deferential, unlikely to challenge institutional authority. He let that settle for a moment. I don't know all 234 children. I don't know how those compulsions affected each of them. But I know what mine felt like, from the inside, and I know what it felt like when they were removed, and the difference between those two states is so large that I am still understanding it. I am putting that in the record so that those 234 children, if they ever want to know what happened to them, can find it. He paused. 33 violations, he said. Removed by the Elf Council 3 weeks ago. I am standing here because a house elf named Dobby, who was himself in a situation of magical bondage while he was doing it, ran a wellness scan on me on my birthday and found them. He had been watching over me for 5 years because my mother asked him to. He looked at Dobby, standing at the edge of the speaking stone area. Dobby had been, in the Malfoy household, beaten for small infractions, worked without rest, denied basic dignity for his entire life up to that point. He did not have to care about me. There was no compulsion requiring it. He chose to. That is in the record too. Dobby's ears had gone very pink. He was pressing his knuckles against his mouth. His enormous eyes were shining. I want to say one more thing, Harry said. I am not standing here because I want anyone to feel bad for me. I am not interested in pity. I am not interested in being a symbol, which is what I was going to be if none of this had happened. I was going to be managed into a war someone else designed, carrying weapons someone else chose, dying in a way someone else considered acceptable losses. He looked out at the crowd, and there was nothing soft in his gaze, nothing performing bravery or performing composure, just a 6-year-old boy who was actually, genuinely, completely unafraid of the room. I am standing here because the world should know what was done, and because the permanent record should say it was done, and because the permanent record should also say that it was undone. By an elf who chose to care. By a council that answered when called. By a godfather who kept faith for 3 years in Azkaban. By a truth that survived 33 attempts to make me too small to hold it. He stopped. That's all, he said. Thank you. The silence lasted for a long moment. Then Griselda Marchbanks, from the front row, began to applaud. Not the relieved applause of a crowd that has been waiting for permission to react, the deliberate, considered applause of someone who has just heard something they think needs marking. It spread. Harry stepped off the speaking stone. Dobby was there, 4 steps away, and Harry walked directly to him, and the elf was already vibrating with the effort of not making noise, and Harry put his arms around him and Dobby held on with both arms, the way Sirius had held on in the Ministry anteroom, and for a moment it was just that, the two of them, in the middle of several hundred people applauding, in the clear August morning, holding on. Then Sirius was there, his hand on Harry's shoulder, and Harry looked up and Sirius's face was completely undone in the best way, jaw tight, eyes bright, composed right up to the point where he clearly wasn't anymore. Don't, Harry said. I'm not, Sirius said. His voice was very rough. You absolutely are. I am categorically, he stopped. You were brilliant, he said. Both of you. Your mother, he stopped again, pressed his lips together, tried once more. She would have said you did well and then asked you 17 questions about the specific word choices because she wanted to understand your reasoning, and it would have taken 3 hours and she would have told you she was proud at the end of it, and James would have just, he laughed, broken and warm, James would have just told everyone in earshot. Repeatedly. 4 months. Harry laughed. It was the good laugh, the surprised one, the one that was becoming less surprising the more he had reason to use it. The afternoon was long and filled with things. Fudge stayed for all of it, which Harry had not expected, and afterward he found Harry at the edge of the grounds and asked, very quietly, for a private conversation. Harry agreed, and they talked for 20 minutes, and Fudge was not the politician he'd been at the first meeting. He was a man who had just watched the record of his ministry's programs read out under an open sky and had understood, perhaps for the first time, that documentation and distance were not the same thing as not having done something. He did not apologize, exactly. He talked around it in the way that politicians talk around accountability, but there was something in it that was genuine, the specific embarrassment of someone who had believed the small corruptions of his institution were acceptable because they were normal, suddenly confronted with what normal had cost. Harry listened. He said, when Fudge was finished, the ministry needs to work out what it wants to be. I'm not going to do that for you. But the council is watching, and the record is open, and the next time something like this happens, there will be another tribunal and it will be worse for the ministry, not better. He paused. That's not a threat. It's just how it works now. Fudge nodded. He put his bowler hat back on, he'd been holding it through the whole conversation, and left without further ceremony. Amelia Bones cornered Fun to discuss the legal implications of the compulsion program findings for 3 hours. Harry passed them twice on his wanderings around the grounds, and each time they were deep in documents with the focused energy of two people who were enjoying their work. Dumbledore waited. He stayed in the named parties section all afternoon, not approaching, letting people come and go. Several Wisengamot members spoke to him. Some of what they said appeared to be difficult. He received it with the composure of someone who has decided to take the full weight of a thing and is not performing their ability to bear it but actually bearing it. Late in the afternoon, when the grounds had mostly cleared and the elves were quietly moving through the space returning it to itself, Harry walked over. "Are you going to be all right?" Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him. Something moved across his face, not what Harry expected, not the performing of resilience or the dignified acceptance. Something much more human. The look of a very old person who has been keeping score their whole life and has just discovered a significant error in the accounting. "I am going to be different," Dumbledore said. "Whether different is all right remains to be seen." He paused. "I have been thinking, since Hogwarts, since our conversation in the meeting hall, about what it means to be wrong." He folded his hands. "I have been wrong before. I am not unfamiliar with it. But I have always been wrong in ways I could contextualize, wrong decisions made from right principles, miscalculations in pursuit of correct goals. This is the first time I have been wrong in a way that has no context that flatters me. I treated a child as a piece." He said it quietly, the plain statement of it. "And the child is standing in front of me free, and the dark wizard is gone, and it happened entirely without the pieces of the plan I considered non-negotiable, and I do not know what to do with that." Harry looked at him. "Start the Horcrux research," Harry said. "Do the work you're actually good at. Stop trying to manage outcomes and start trying to give the council accurate information so we can finish the job properly." He paused. "That's enough." "That's a lot, actually." "Yes," Dumbledore said. "It is." "And come back," Harry said. "To talk. Not to plan around me. Just to talk." He held the old man's gaze. "You know things I need to know. And you," he stopped, "found the honest thing, you knew my parents. You watched them grow up. I want that. Not the managed version where you tell me the parts that support your narrative. The actual version." Dumbledore's face changed. Not broke open the way Sirius's did, more like a door opening, very carefully, after a long time closed. "Yes," he said. "I can do that." "Good," Harry said. He left Dumbledore at the edge of the amphitheater in the long evening light and walked back through the sanctuary toward the sound of Sirius's voice somewhere in the trees, which was arguing amiably with Fun about something, and Dobby's interjections, and the specific quality of noise produced by people who are comfortable with each other having an argument that is actually a conversation. He stopped at the edge of the forest and looked up. The sanctuary's lights were coming on between the branches, one by one in the growing dusk, the amber and gold of them, patient and familiar, the same lights that had been the first thing he'd seen when he arrived here 3 weeks ago and didn't know what anything was. He knew more now. Not everything, there was more of it to know than he'd understood then, and probably more than he understood now. The Horcruxes were out there in the world, waiting to be found and undone. His Hogwarts letter would come in 5 years, and Hogwarts would be whatever he made it. The wizarding world was going through something large and structural and only partway done. He was 6 years old and he had enormous things ahead of him, and he was standing in the first evening of a life that was actually his, watching the sanctuary's lights come on, and he felt, not triumphant, not satisfied in any completed sense, he felt current. Present. Real. The actual shape of himself, inhabiting his own life in the actual present moment, with the actual future genuinely open. He thought about what Sirius had said. Long breakfasts. Nowhere to be. Learning things because he wanted to learn them. The template being built as they went. He thought about a Tuesday that wasn't about survival. Harry Potter. He looked down. Dobby had appeared at his elbow, which he'd stopped finding startling. "Dinner's ready," Dobby said. "Sirius Potter is arguing with Archivist Fun about, did you say Sirius Potter?" Harry said. Dobby blinked. "Dobby, yes." Dobby said, "It just came out." Harry looked at him for a moment. He thought about it. About the name, and what it contained, and the 6 years it didn't cover and the years ahead that it could. He thought about Sirius in his room last night, talking about long breakfasts and flying lessons, talking about James with a voice that was rough and warm in equal measure. He thought about standing in the ministry anteroom and looking at a man he'd never met and knowing without question that this was family. "Black," Harry said. "Same as him." He paused. "Harry Black sounds strange." "Harry Potter Black maybe. I'll think about it." Dobby's ears were very pink again. He was smiling the full smile. "Dobby thinks Harry Potter Black is very good," he said. "Come on," Harry said. "Before Sirius loses the argument." "Sirius will not win the argument," Dobby said confidently, falling into step beside him. "Archivist Fun has 4 centuries of records. Maybe Sirius will argue so creatively that the records become irrelevant. This," Dobby said, "is a real possibility." They walked together through the amber lights of the sanctuary, and the old trees stood their ancient watch, and the evening settled into the particular quality that evenings have when they are unhurried and enough, and somewhere a few corridors away Sirius Black was losing an argument to an archivist and didn't care at all, and the speaking stone in the amphitheater held its permanent record under the first stars, and the world was not finished being what it was going to be. But this part, this evening, this beginning, this first ordinary unguarded moment on the other side of everything, this was already exactly what it needed to be. Harry pushed open the door to the dining hall. The light came out warm and loud and full of people. He walked into it.